some breaking news right now out of Scioto County. The sheriff's office there says they did find the remains of a missing baby. Just moments ago, the sheriff's office told us they found the body of a child in the bottom of a well in Otway. The sheriff says Daniel and Jessica Groves are each facing charges in connection with Dylan Groves' disappearance. They are each charged already with abduction and kidnapping, and the sheriff's office says the case will be referred now to a grand jury for more charges involving the baby's death.
Story we've been following closely. Both Daniel and Jessica Groves were back in court today for a pretrial hearing. This after their 4-month-old baby Dylan was found dead in a well in Scioto County. 13 News reporter Hannah Getz has been following the story from the beginning and joins us with details from court today. Hannah.
Daniel and Jessica Groves exchanged many words and looks before their pretrial hearing today in Scioto County Court. Jessica Groves even shedding a few tears. Today they pled not guilty to additional charges of receiving stolen property.
Each of those counts would carry a maximum sentence of up to 12 months in prison.
Both face the original charges, which include aggravated murder, kidnapping, and gross abuse of a corpse after their 4-month-old baby Dylan was found dead back in June 30 feet down in a Scioto County well. In July, Jessica Groves entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. She still awaits an evaluation.
Spoke with the court clinic about that. I guess the doctor that's going to do that is on vacation, so I'm not sure when that's going to take place.
The court is also waiting on the final autopsy report from the coroner's office. It is yet to be determined if the Groves will be tried together or separate. The final pretrial date is set for the end of September, with the jury trial scheduled to begin mid-October.
I think the whole situation's horrible, and we knew from the moment she was pregnant that it was going to be something awful.
Alicia Maddie is baby Dylan's cousin. She shared these pictures and a statement with us. She says her family is still in shock and grieving over what happened to this beautiful baby boy.
We are both disgusted and devastated by what has happened in the past week, and we wish nothing more than for the ultimate punishment to be given to these sick individuals to which we have the burden of calling family.
The Scioto County Sheriff says Dylan was born with drugs in his system and had been in foster care since birth.
He liked to be swaddled, held close, because he constantly had the shakes and things like that from the addiction. I can't imagine he got clean off of what drugs he was on in 12 days. Daniel and Jessica wouldn't really allow us to be around him. People are posting, why didn't the family do this? Why didn't the family do that? But Daniel threatened us that if we would show up on their property that he would either shoot us or, quote, let his dogs loose. As his family, who loved him more than anyone can even imagine, do not let him just be another face of a child with the misfortune of druggy parents. So today and every day, until there is justice, my family and I will use our voice to make sure Dylan James is not forgotten.
And Jessica Groves, case number 19 CR 586A and V. Counsel had indicated during the recess before the jury's brought down they wish to make a couple motions. Mr. Tiemann, Ms. Scott, Mr. Stratton, who wants to go first?
I'll go, Your Honor. State of Ohio would move for separation of witnesses. The state would ask that lead detective Jody Conkle be permitted as representative of the state sit at council table for the entire proceedings. The state of Ohio would make sure all other witnesses that it intends to call would be outside the presence of the court.
Ms. Scott?
Your Honor, in behalf of the defense, we would concur with that motion, and we would ask that the witnesses be separated that do intend on testifying in this matter or have a potential of testifying in this matter. Thank you. And we would obviously allow the state representative from the law enforcement.
Mr. Stratton?
We also concur, Your Honor.
Motion for separation of witnesses will be granted. Detective Conkle will be allowed to remain in as a representative of the investigating agency. We'll direct counsel to police this order. I don't know who your witnesses are, so I will ask at this time, are there any witnesses, anyone in the back of the courtroom that anticipates being called to testify in this matter? No one, it is indicated they are. We'll direct counsel for both the state and the defense to police that and make sure if any potential witnesses do come into the courtroom that that's brought to the court's attention immediately. Mr. Tiemann, did you have any other motions?
None from state, Your Honor.
Ms. Scott?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, although we did participate in a very meaningful jury selection yesterday, we would at this time, in light of the event that The majority of the individuals that we questioned yesterday, and I believe there was approximately 63 individuals that we questioned, almost all, not everyone, almost all expressed that they had either read or discussed or heard about this matter through some form of media or discussion with a family member. We would ask at this time, in light of the event, that this jury is predisposed and may have formed opinions in this matter that they cannot set aside. We would ask for a change of venue at this time. Thank you.
Given my understanding of the case law on this, Ms. Scott, do you have anything, case law or authority to support that motion?
Your Honor, at this time we would not have any supporting case law or documentation for that.
Mr. Stratton?
Your Honor, we'll join in that motion with Attorney Scott.
Mr. Tiemann, Ms. Hutchinson, whoever wants to respond.
Yes, Your Honor. If it please the court, a selection of jury is based on Criminal Rule 18b, which means upon the motion of any party or upon its own motion, the court may transfer an action when it appears that a fair and impartial trial cannot be held. The state would submit that we've seated a fair and impartial jury. We went through a robust jury selection yesterday. Change of venue is not required merely because of pretrial publicity. If a juror can lay aside his impression or the opinions and render a verdict based on the evidence presented in court, that's a standard. The jury was questioned significantly in regard to that, both on the record here in front of the court, as well as for those that wanted more privacy from the other jurors up at the bench. We've had extensive arguments, we've had extensive discussions, took a day to select the jury. Based on that, the State of Ohio submits that change in venue is not warranted. Thank you, Your Honor.
Well, we had a full day of jury selection yesterday. The jury was seated in this matter. The jurors and the 4 alternates that were seated in this matter, some of them, most of them, had indicated that they had heard something about this case before. Some of them indicated they had not before they arrived here yesterday. All of the jurors that were selected, as did the alternates, indicated that they, my recollection, indicated that they believed the more reliable way to obtain information would be to hear it firsthand and not rely on media accounts or Facebook or the internet or what their particular source of that information was. They've also all indicated that if they were chosen, they could base their decision solely on the evidence and testimony presented in the courtroom, put aside what they had learned, to whatever extent that was, to each individual juror from other sources, and that they would be fair and impartial to both sides, and they indicated they could follow the law as instructed by the court. So at this time, the motion for change of venue will be denied. Anything further, Ms. Scott?
No, Your Honor, not at this time. Thank you.
Stratton?
No, Your Honor.
Court is recessed. Mr. Bryant, once the jurors are ready and the court reporter is ready, I'll be ready to go ahead and bring them down.
Check a few minutes ago.
We are back on the record, State of Ohio versus Daniel A. Groves and State of Ohio versus Jessica Groves, case number 19 CR 586 A and B. Counsel, the parties, and the jury are back in the courtroom. The jury was selected yesterday. At this time, I believe we are ready to begin with opening statements in this matter. This time, counsel for the parties may have an opening statement. Opening statements of counsel are concise and orderly descriptions of each side's claims and defenses and the evidence counsel expects to produce in support of those claims and defenses. They are not evidence. Each side will address you once during opening statements, with the state going first. Is the state ready to proceed with opening statements?
We are, Your Honor.
Is the defense ready, Ms. Scott?
We are ready. Thank you.
Mr. Stratton?
Yes, sir.
The state may address the jury.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, opposing counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good morning. Again, my name is Julie Cook Hutchinson, and I, along with prosecuting attorney Shane Tiemann, represent the state of Ohio. Before we discuss what it is that the state must prove and what we believe the evidence will be, I too want to thank you for your service. The service that you are about to complete here on behalf of your community is very vital to our American justice system. And each of us understand that each of you have other obligations you are putting aside to be here with us this week. So thank you. I also want to apologize to you in advance. The case you're about to hear is a difficult case. You're going to see, hear, and learn things that you cannot unsee, unhear, or unlearn. And for that, I'm sorry. Having said that, let's discuss what the charges are in this case. The defendants, Daniel and Jessica Groves, are charged with 11 felony charges. His Honor, Judge Kuhn will instruct you on the law that you are to follow throughout this trial. If something I say differs from what something he says, you are to follow His Honor's instructions. Keep in mind that some of the terminology we use in everyday language.
Those are some of the words uttered outside that courtroom in New York in the Harvey Weinstein case, but opening statements now in the Daniel and Jessica Groves case in Ohio. Let's listen live.
You heard in voir dire the phrase being in cahoots with someone. And you also heard in Ohio that the legal term for that is complicity. His Honor may instruct you that the defendant or defendants can be found guilty of the offense charged as a principal offender, in other words, the person who committed that crime, but also can be found guilty of that principal offense in complicity. In other words, they don't have to be the person who actually committed the crime, but complicit to that person or in cahoots with that person. You may be further instructed that complicity means aided or abetted. Sorry about that. Technology is great when it works. And you may also be instructed that aiding and abetting includes supporting, assisting, cooperating with, advising, inciting another to commit a crime. Complicity also includes conspiring with another person to commit a crime. State of Ohio versus Daniel Groves and State of Ohio versus Jessica Groves charges each defendant with the following felony charges. Aggravated murder. Requires the state of Ohio to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendants did or were complicit to purposely causing the death of baby Dylan, who was under 13 years of age at the time of the offense. Defendants are charged in count 2 with murder, which requires the state of Ohio to prove that the defendants did or were complicit to knowingly causing the death of baby Dylan as a proximate result of committing or attempting to commit a felony offense of violence that is a felony of the first or second degree. In count 3, the defendants are charged with kidnapping. Kidnapping requires the state of Ohio to prove that the defendants did or were complicit to, by force, threat, or deception, or in the case of a victim under 13 by any means, remove baby Dylan from the place where he was found or restrain his liberty for the purpose of hindering, impeding, or obstructing a function of the government. Count 4, child endangering, requires the state of Ohio to prove that the defendants did or were complicit to, as a parent, guardian, custodian, person having custody or control, or in loco parentis of a child under the age of 18, create a substantial risk of health or safety to baby Dylan by violating a duty of care, protection, or support, and that violation resulted in serious physical harm. Count 5, the defendants are charged with tampering with evidence, and that requires the state of Ohio to prove that the defendants did or were complicit in knowing that an official proceeding or investigation was in progress or was about to be or likely to be instituted, alter, destroy, conceal, or remove any record, document, or thing with purpose to impair its value or availability as evidence in such investigation. Count 6 charges the defendants with interference with custody and requires the state of Ohio to prove that the defendants did or were complicit to, knowing that he or she had no privilege to do so or being reckless in that regard, entice, keep, or harbor baby Dylan from a parent, guardian, or custodian of a child under the age of 18, and that baby Dylan suffered serious physical harm as a result of that violation. Count 7, gross abuse of a corpse, requires the state of Ohio to prove that the defendant did or was complicit to treating baby Dylan's body in a way that would outrage reasonable community sensibilities. The remaining counts 8, 9, 10, and 11, are counts of felonious assault, and they require the state of Ohio to prove that the defendants did or were complicit to knowingly causing serious physical harm to baby Dylan. Having heard the charges you are to consider, let's turn to the evidence and testimony that the state of Ohio believes will be presented in the coming week. The evidence will be that on January 10th, 2019, in the early morning hours, the defendants Daniel Groves and Jessica Groves arrived by self-transport at the emergency department of Southern Ohio Medical Center here in Scioto County, Ohio. Several hospital employees will testify here. They will testify that for Jessica, labor was nearly complete upon arrival, as she was dilated 9.5 out of 10 centimeters. They will testify that Jessica Groves refused to answer any questions and that a urine sample had to be taken by straight catheter. The testimony will be that hospital staff administered no pain medications to Jessica Groves for several reasons. There were no medical records of prenatal care. Jessica appeared to be under the influence but refused to answer any questions about what substances she may have taken. And not giving medications enabled the staff at the hospital to determine what had been ingested pre-admission so that they could care for baby Dylan once he was born. It will be claimed that Jessica, for some period, lengthy period, had no prenatal care because she did not know she was pregnant. However, the evidence will show that she's had a prior pregnancy and that she was once a licensed LPN. Baby Dylan was delivered within approximately 30 minutes, and the testimony will be that that delivery was uneventful. No complications in that delivery. Not long after birth, baby Dylan was taken to the nursery and put on oxygen because he was born early and needed support. The testimony will be that neither parent accompanied that baby to the nursery. At some point, urine was also collected from baby Dylan for drug screening purposes, and both Jessica Groves and baby Dylan had positive drug screens there at the hospital. Within 12 hours, baby Dylan begins to exhibit symptoms of drug withdrawal. As a result of that, the hospital then notified Scioto County Children's Services, and baby Dylan was kept in the nursery for 5 days, awaiting a discharge plan that the hospital and Children's Services could agree was safe. Initially, Children's Services believed that Daniel Groves was employed with Rural King and that he could submit to a clean urine test. A safety plan was discussed wherein baby Dylan would be placed with Daniel Groves, that Jessica Groves would not live in the home, and that her contact with the children in the home would be supervised by Daniel Groves. Children's Services was going to require Jessica to complete a drug assessment and to undergo treatment and be compliant with that treatment. There was to be weekly contact between baby Dylan and Children's Services. However, the hospital would not agree to discharge baby Dylan under that safety plan. Prior to the release of baby Dylan from the hospital, his umbilical cord was sent off for testing, and the results were returned. Baby Dylan's U cord, or umbilical cord, showed positive for methamphetamine, amphetamine, fentanyl, and opiates, including morphine. On January 15th, 2019, Andrea Bowling became baby Dylan's foster mother as she picked him up from the hospital. On January 16th, 2019, Scioto County Children's Services awarded emergency custody of baby Dylan to Children's Services. During the time that foster mother Andrea Bowling had baby Dylan, he was seen twice by a pediatrician named Dr. Ali. His medical records indicate, and Dr. Ali will testify, that he was free from injury and progressing well, with the exception of some drug withdrawals. Baby Dylan lived with Andrea until January 28th, 2019, when Children's Services decided to place the baby back with Daniel Groves under circumstances similar to what was previously discussed. Evidence will show that Jessica was assessed by Mahajan Therapeutics for drug treatment on January 18th, 2019, and that she was compliant with treatment for less than 3 weeks. The defendants were compliant once the baby was placed back with them with pediatrician appointments for less than 1 month. However, from those 2 appointments, the evidence will show that baby Dylan again was injury-free and progressing well. The defendants also were not compliant with Children's Services. Evidence will show that between February 4th and February 25th, Children's Services was making multiple attempts to contact this family, to no avail. Children's Services even went to the school of the 14-year-old sibling to attempt to get a message to the parents. Finally, on February 25th, Children's Services was successful in making contact with the family at their residence at 2241 Mount Hope Road, Otway, Ohio, here in Scioto County. From that date, February 25th, to March 28th, again, the defendants were not compliant with Children's Services contact. On March 28th, Children's Services again made contact, successful contact, with the family at that Mount Hope address. Baby Dylan was wearing a long-sleeved onesie, and he did not appear to have any visible injuries. It was the last time baby Dylan was known to be alive. No calls for medical assistance for baby Dylan were ever made for that residence. That's going to be the evidence. All through April and May, Children's Services repeatedly tries to make contact. Children's Services eventually calls Rural King to attempt to make contact with Daniel Groves, and they're informed that Mr. Groves had not worked there since mid-2018. Deputies of the Scioto County Sheriff's Office attempted to make contact. Captain Murphy and Chief Miller from the Sheriff's Office attempt to make contact. They see the defendants on the roadway near their home and attempt to stop them, and a pursuit ensues, and the four-wheeler they are on flees off the roadway into the woods. Juvenile court sent an employee to make contact. Finally, the Sheriff's Office obtains a search warrant for that Mount Hope residence. And on June 10th, 2019, several members of the Scioto County Sheriff's Department, the Southern Ohio Drug Task Force, and the Ohio State Highway Patrol surround the residence on Mount Hope Road, demanding that Jessica and Daniel surrender. Within about 30 minutes, Jessica Groves appears at the front door, and the testimony will be that she's belligerent. Hours later, a robot is deployed inside the residence to locate Daniel Groves, who is not coming out at the demands of law enforcement. Both were transported to the Scioto County Sheriff's Department for interrogation by Detective Conkle. You will hear that Jessica Groves maintains that Children's Services has come and taken her baby. Evidence will be that Daniel Groves is dope sick in there during that interview, rolling around in the floor. Evidence will also be that he tells several stories, starting with Children's Services came and took the baby. But eventually, Daniel Groves admits that baby Dylan is dead. On June 11th, 2019, Daniel agreed to take Detective Conkle to Dylan's body. Nothing was found. On June 12th, the evidence will be that these two defendants were placed in the room together and began whispering amongst each other. The things they're saying indicate to Detective Conkle that she's been misled about where this baby's body might be. After further interrogation, Daniel Groves again agrees to take Detective Conkle to baby Dylan's body. Eventually, Daniel Groves leads the sheriff's office to a spring-fed well, 40-foot well, in the middle of a hayfield. Members of the local fire department respond to assist, and the fire department could not make it through in the truck, so they used a brush truck to get to that location. They attempted to pump water from the well. However, the pump was only successful in removing about 10 feet of the water. After that, they went back to the fire truck and they retrieved parts of an extraction kit. And with a gold metal hook, a strap, and some cord, they for 3 hours fished around in this water before they finally hooked what they thought might be the container that contained baby Dylan's body. It took several men to pull the container to the surface. Evidence will show that the container consisted of these two metal crates, or these two plastic milk crates, chained together, zip-tied, and wire-tied. It was weighted down with several rocks and a round metal object around Dylan's body. The container was loaded undisturbed for coroner's transport to the Montgomery County Coroner's Office. The coroner will testify that baby Dylan's death was the result of homicidal violence. Dr. Brown will testify that baby Dylan had 2 skull fractures, 2 rib fractures, upper arm fractures, lower arm fractures, and lower leg fractures. She will testify that some fractures showed signs of healing and others did not, and she'll explain to you what that means. The testimony will also be that baby Dylan again tested positive for methamphetamines and amphetamines. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, by the close of this case, I submit to you that you will have proof beyond a reasonable doubt that each of these defendants is guilty of each crime that they're charged with. And at that time, I will ask you to return a verdict of guilty as to each defendant and as to each count. Again, I thank you for your time.
If it pleases the court, the state, Attorney Scott, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let me begin the story of this tragedy. As most of you are aware, through the news or personal experience, our community, Portsmouth and Sauter County, has been and still is ground zero for this terrible drug problem. We hear regularly about overdoses and crimes directly related to drugs. It has taken a foothold here and has devastated our friends, our family, and our whole community. It is no respecter of age, status, or wealth. This scourge of our modern society turns spouses against spouses, siblings against siblings, grandparents against grandchildren, and breaks the bonds of family. Grandparents are raising grandchildren, and in some cases, great-grandparents are raising great-grandchildren. There are so many people trying to reverse and correct this problem. There has been this upswell in our community of people that have said enough is enough. We're going to change and come back. We will win this fight, make our home a better place. But the first step in winning this fight is for individuals that have been led down this path to take personal responsibility for their crimes and their sins. And that starts right here, right now. My client, Jessica Groves, was and still is a drug addict. There is no doubt about that fact. She, and she alone, caused the injuries to Dylan Groves, which led to his death. She murdered Dylan Groves. She will testify that she murdered Dylan Groves. She will testify to the injuries that she caused to Dylan Groves. The 2-inch fracture on the skull, the 1-inch fracture on the skull, the 1/2-inch laceration on the left arm, fracture of the left humerus, fracture of the left radius and ulna, red contusion on the right side of the chest, healed rib fractures, and the drugs in baby Dylan's system. These are the injuries caused to Dylan Groves by Jessica Groves. Finally, you might ask, why put everybody through this ordeal? Why put everybody through this trauma? The answer is because she's going to do the right thing right now. And that right thing is to take personal responsibility for her crimes and sins. And that right thing also is to protect and defend an innocent man. Daniel Groves had nothing to do with the death of Dylan Groves and did not cause these injuries. He was foolishly unaware of these injuries. And I say foolishly because hindsight's always 20/20. And sometimes you're oblivious to what's going on. This is especially true from someone you have known for 20 years and that you have loved. Dylan Groves died on March 28th, and Daniel found him unresponsive. Once he found him, panic and confusion set in. And with that panic and confusion came poor decisions that leads us all to here today. Did he help hide the body? Yes. Did he suggest the well? Yes, he knew where this well was. Did he help craft a coffin and preserve Dylan? Yes, he did. But that is all he did. Jessica Groves is the person responsible for the death of Dylan Groves. She is here in front of you today, taking personal responsibility for her crimes and her sins. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Stratton. Ms. Scott, you may address the jury.
Thank you,
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good morning. And as Ms. Hutchinson spoke to you all today, we definitely thank you for your service here in this matter, your time and attention in this matter. And as I talked to you a little bit yesterday, what I believe is an honor to participate in this system that is very unique to our country. And we do appreciate the full attention that I know that you will give to the seriousness of this case. And obviously it's a very upsetting topic and very disturbing topic that we do, and that Ms. Hutchinson has already apologized to you that we're going to have to discuss with you all over the next several days. I'm not sure if you were expecting to hear what Mr. Stratton has already spoken to you about, but obviously, ladies and gentlemen, we would argue and support that position in this matter, that Ms. Groves is the principal perpetrator in this matter. And that is in a position that has actually been held by the state in this case since this case was arraigned right here in this courtroom. In fact, Ms. Hutchinson actually called Jessica Groves.
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach the bench?
Opening statements, whether offered by the prosecution or the defense, are not evidence, but they are merely designed to assist you in following the evidence in this case.
Thank you, Your Honor. As I was saying, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, even the state in this case, and Ms. Hutchinson, as far as that arraignment in this matter, when this case was right here in this court for the very first time, actually labeled Ms. Groves principal perpetrator. That will be the position that Mr. Groves will hold. That is the position that actually Jessica Groves is going to own in this matter, as you've heard from the opening statement. You also heard Mr. Tiemann yesterday in his voir dire and questioning of the jury. He said that they have the burden. They have the standard that they have to prove, and I will ask you that you hold them to that standard for each and every case, each and every charge in this matter. They are the ones that have to prove each and every element. They have to provide you evidence, facts that support each and every one of those charges that my client is facing before you. And I would ask that you hold them to that burden, hold them to that standard, hold them to that beyond a reasonable doubt that he spoke to you about yesterday, that the judge is going to fully instruct you on. We are going to ask that you make sure, prior to rendering your verdict, that you either have the facts that support that case or you do not have the facts to support that case, and you weigh that against beyond a reasonable doubt. We would ask that you would listen to all the evidence, listen to all the testimony before you make up your mind in this case. And I'm sure this case is going to be very emotional, this is going to be very taxing, and it's going to anger you. If it doesn't, I'll be very surprised. But I want to ask you and to remind you to render a fair and a just verdict here, one that matches the law that you will be instructed on. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard my co-counsel in this matter, Mr. Stratton, who's representing Mrs. Groves, talk about how my client participated in helping her dispose of the body. You heard Ms. Hutchinson get up here and tell you that my client actually, after some misconception, that he did lead the law enforcement agency to the recovery of Dylan's body. But that's it, ladies and gentlemen. He only helped dispose of the body. He did eventually cooperate with the police because he couldn't lie about it anymore. And I believe that you will hear law enforcement come in and talk to you about that. He led them to where Dylan had been placed. He did not cause his death. He never kidnapped him. He never caused his death. He never endangered him. He never interfered with custody. He never caused harm to this child. He cannot be the source of felonious assault that he has also been charged with. And that's what I want you to listen for. Either that's going to be proven or not proven throughout this case. And it is our position that that will not be proven by the state. That will be accounted for by the actions of Jessica Groves, and she is going to own all of those actions, and she will tell you in her own words, or we anticipate her telling you in her own words, how, whether you call it my client was blind, whether you call it that he was foolishly unaware, as Mr. Stratton pointed out, he may have been, ladies and gentlemen, but he had no knowledge, he had no participation, and he was not the source of the injuries that resulted in Dylan's death. Once again,
listen to all of the evidence, listen to the testimony before coming to your conclusion, and render a fair and just verdict in this matter. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Is the state ready to proceed with their presentation of evidence?
We are, Your Honor.
Call your first witness.
Your Honor, State of Ohio would call Darian Lyles.
Darian Lyles. What you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Ma'am, please have a seat. Now, ma'am, there is media here in the courtroom today. Do you have any objection if your image is filmed or photographed during your testimony? All right. You state your full name for the court reporter, please.
Darian Lyles.
Mr. Tiemann, you may inquire.
Ma'am, would you still spell your first name for the court reporter?
D-A-R-I-E-N-N.
D-A-R-I-E-N-N-E? Okay. And your last name Lyles, L-I-L-E-S?
Yes.
All right.
You need to speak up. Talk to him like he's clear across the room.
Okay.
Which I pretty much am. Where are you from, ma'am?
Lucasville, Ohio.
Okay. And what's your educational background?
I have an associate's degree in nursing from Shawnee State and a bachelor's from Ohio University.
And what kind of licensure as a nurse does that give you?
A registered nurse.
All right. Are you employed?
Yes.
What's your employment history?
I've worked at Southern Ohio Medical Center for 3 years, a year in the emergency department and 2 years in maternity.
Southern Ohio Medical Center, what is that?
The medical center here in town, the hospital here in town.
Is that a full-service hospital?
Yes.
And you'd indicated you'd worked there for 3 years?
Yes.
Where are you currently stationed?
Maternity.
Okay. And where were you stationed in January of 2019?
Maternity.
Okay. What are your duties in maternity?
We provide care to the laboring patient. We evaluate the status from the time of arrival to delivery, assist in care after delivery with initiation of breastfeeding and postpartum care, things like that.
Have you ever heard the term triage?
Yes.
What does that refer to?
Triage is where we evaluate patients on a basis of need. We determine if they are in labor, if they need NSTs. We evaluate the mother, the baby, and their well-being.
Okay. And I know you think you're speaking loud, but if you can speak a little more loudly so we can hear, okay? Ma'am, I'd like to direct your attention to January 10th of 2019. Were you working that day?
Yes, I was.
Do you recall what hours you were working?
I would work 7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
All right. So that being January 10th, are you talking about on January 9th you would have worked at 7 p.m.?
Yes, I would have came in on the evening of the 9th.
And then then you would have been relieved of duty on 7 a.m. the morning of the 10th?
Yeah, about 7:30 in the morning.
Okay. And where were you working that morning?
I was in triage that morning.
Okay. Where is triage located in the hospital?
It is at the entrance of the double doors of maternity, the first door on the left.
Okay. Were there other nurses or employees working with you in maternity that day?
Yes, that night there were a few of us in triage. There was me and Amanda Jones.
Okay. What was that evening like at maternity? Was it busy? Was it steady?
It was slow. It was a slow evening.
What about that morning of January 10th? How was it then?
Slow until this delivery. Then it became somewhat hectic.
Okay. Do you recall on that morning individuals by the names of Groves coming in to maternity?
Yes, I do.
All right. And approximately when did they come in?
5:25 in the morning.
And do you recall their names without looking at your medical records?
Yes, Jessica Groves and Daniel Groves.
And are they in the courtroom here today?
Yes,
If you could point them out for the judge.
right over there.
Okay.
She's pointed to and identified the defendants in this matter.
Thank you, Your Honor. To your knowledge, why were the Groves in the hospital that day?
Jessica believed she was in labor.
What is the typical procedure or protocol you follow when someone comes in purportedly in labor?
Usually when a patient presents to triage and believes they are in labor, we would typically get a urine sample, weigh the patient, go over their prenatal records, question them about their pregnancy, any complications, ask them about the baby and their visits to the physician, and then from that we will do a cervical exam and usually recheck them within an hour if advanced dilation is not the case.
Why all the questions?
It is important for us to have a good idea of the care that the mother has received, any complications with mother or baby. That way we can be prepared for delivery, for adequate care for the mother and the infant.
When someone comes in for treatment at the hospital, is there any documentation that is made of the patient and the treatment provided?
Yes, we document everything we do in Watch Child.
Okay. What types of documentation do you make?
We document things like how they presented to us, when they came, what they stated about their care, what their urine drug screen showed, and what they were dilated, things like that.
All right. The Southern Ohio Medical Center maintains such records in the ordinary course of its business. Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Let the record reflect I'm handing what has been marked as State's Exhibit 1 to opposing counsel for their inspection. The record reflect I'm handing witness what has been marked as State's Exhibit 1. Ma'am, this is kind of unwieldy. This is a microphone under here, so if you can attempt not to lay this heavily down on the microphone, that'd be appreciated by the court reporter. If you would take a chance and take a moment and look through that. Do you recognize those documents? Yes. What do those documents purport to be?
These are her prenatal flow sheets, records, and documentation of her labor.
Does this appear to be a medical record maintained by Southern Ohio Medical Center for Jessica Groves?
Yes, it does.
Does it appear to be a true and accurate copy of that record?
Yes, it does.
Ma'am, from time to time, unless there's an objection, if you need to refresh your recollection as to those records, you may do so. Are you part of those records in your treatment and care of Ms. Groves at that time?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Make sure you speak up to the court reporter, okay?
I want to take you back to the Groves' initial interactions and appearance at the hospital. What were your observations of Ms. Groves at that time?
When Jessica presented to us in triage, she had come via wheelchair from the emergency department. She was very flat, disconnected, and uncooperative with our care. She kept stating, it's coming, and that is all we could get from her.
What was your first step at that point with the care of Ms. Groves?
At that point, we assumed she was most likely in labor. We started asking her questions such as how many weeks she was, if this was her first baby, who was her physician, had she had any complications with the pregnancy, and she did not answer any of our questions.
Was there anything about that that was unusual to you?
Yes, it was. We see this sometimes where they present this way in pain and cannot answer, but that was not the case here. It was more uncooperative and just usually people will give some sort of information. That way we can at least have their name and look for medical records.
Did anybody provide you or other hospital staff with the information to those questions?
No. At one point we were given her name by her husband, and that was all.
What was her physical condition at that point?
She did not seem to us that she was in much pain for somebody that was about to have a baby, just in the wheelchair, and at that point we moved her to a bed to evaluate her.
What's the process at that point for a nurse and the staff at the hospital with regard to somebody that's in labor? What do you do after you move her to the bed?
Typically we would have gotten a urine sample before, and we could not have done that here. So once we done a cervical exam and realized that she was complete, we moved her to the closest room to triage.
Why were you unable to get a urine sample?
For a couple reasons. She refused initially, and then after we done a cervical exam, when a patient is complete, we usually don't allow them at that point to stand. We would have put her on a bedpan once we got to the room.
Okay. What do you mean by complete?
It is in reference to a cervical exam. Closed is 0. It goes from 0 to 10, 10 being the furthest dilation. The patient is ready to deliver.
What happens at that point?
At that point, we usually call the doctor, start an IV, assess fetal well-being, keep mother on the monitor, things like that.
And were those steps taken with Ms. Groves?
Yes, they were.
Was there any point when you did get additional information as to her condition or prenatal care?
No, she would never give us any information. While pushing, when the baby was about to deliver, the father finally spoke up and said that she had used heroin 2 days ago.
All right. And that father being Daniel Groves?
Yes.
Who you identified earlier?
Yes.
Is there a protocol that comes into effect when you learn that someone may have been abusing drugs and being pregnant?
Yes, it was also stated that the reason that they could not get to their prenatal care visits was because she was always too high. So at that point, we alerted nursery to the possibility that there would be a sick baby, and the physician also, just for care of the mother after delivery.
What do you mean by nursery?
The nursery staff. On maternity, I would be a labor and delivery nurse, and in the back there's a nursery, and we have separate nursery staff who are trained to take care of an infant.
All right. And this is all part of the maternity department
Yes.
at the
Yeah.
hospital? Okay. So there's medical providers as well at the nursery. It's not just a place you have the baby sleep and rock, right?
Yes.
Okay. Fully equipped with medical care for the babies in the nursery?
Yes.
Now, in your daily experience with patients at Southern Ohio Medical Center, do you ever see patients that are under the influence of drugs?
Yes, I do. I worked in the emergency department for a year before I worked on maternity, so I seen it frequently there. And then, unfortunately, we do see it a lot on maternity also.
And from your training experience, are there signs that indicate to you possible substance abuse?
Yes, usually how the patient presents, how cooperative the patient is, their affect, things like that. Yeah.
You've gone over some of those, and you testified that there was indications by statements that she had abused drugs. What other observations did you make of Jessica Groves with regard to potential substance abuse?
Initially, what alarmed us was that she was complete and not in pain. That's very, very unusual for somebody who we've not administered pain medication to. very disconnected, would not respond to what we were saying. Things like that usually allow us to see that patients seem to be under the influence. She was not moaning, was not the typical patient who is delivering a baby.
All right. Let's talk about delivery for a minute. We'll go to that. Describe the typical delivery for patients in this condition.
It's usually a smooth delivery, honestly. It's usually quick and easy for them. There's not much laboring. Most of it has been done at home prior to coming to the hospital for the care. This was very typical of...
Just to make sure I'm understanding, you're talking about delivery when people who are abusing substances?
Yes.
Okay. The number of staff that SOMC staffs for such a delivery increase, or do they maintain the same?
It is the same, but if staff is available to help, we help.
Were you assisting with the delivery?
Yes, I was.
Were there any medications provided at that time for the delivery?
No, there was not. Since we were unable to initially get a urine sample from her, we will not give narcotics. And also because she was so close to delivery, it is not good for babies breathing to administer narcotics that close to delivery. So no, she was not given any medications prior to delivery.
Ma'am, you'd indicated that you could not get urine results or a urine test done earlier because of a number of reasons. Was a urine analysis ultimately done with regard to her?
Yes, it was. We asked her to void on a bedpan for us once she got to the room, and she also refused, so we had to straight cath her for a sterile specimen before any medications were given so that it would not interfere with the drug screen.
Okay. And was this before or after delivery?
This was before.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Let the record reflect I'm handing two separate documents to counsel. They'll be marked States Exhibits 2 and 3.
No objection, Your Honor.
Ma'am, I'm handing you up the marked States Exhibits 2 and 3. Look at those and identify them for the court.
These are drug screens.
Whose drug screens are they purported to be?
Jessica Groves.
And would those be part of that larger folder binder you have in front of you as well?
Yes, they would be.
Okay. Is this the urinalysis drug screen that you referenced earlier in your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. States Exhibit 2, and I'll put them up here for the jury to see. I'm going to have them up on the screen. We'll get you to see them from there, okay?
Okay.
Can you see that okay over there?
Yes.
All right. What is States Exhibit 2?
She has tested positive for amphetamines.
All right. So we have, being she, is this for Jessica D. Groves?
Yes.
And this was registration on January 10th, 2019. Is this the morning we've been talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And we have test results here. If you could explain to the jury the layout of this form.
Over here on the left column is the drugs we are testing for. On the side is the result. So none detected means the patient there was none detected that close to the urine, and the positive means that there was use of that.
Referring to the positive column, it looks like there's one to the right of urine amphetamine screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it says AB, I assume that is that unconfirmed?
Yes.
Positive. POS being positive?
Yes.
All right. And then we go through there below that, and on the other columns we see none detected. Is that right?
Yes.
Including the heroin?
Yes.
And then at the bottom we see, what do we see there at the bottom?
It is an explanation of how they run the test.
Okay. So there's an explanation how they run the test, and below that there's what's a urine methamphetamine screen?
Yes.
And does that also say positive?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And do you understand why these are marked unconfirmed?
Yes, we do. It has recently changed. It used to just say positive, and there was a couple incidents where there was mess ups with the testing, so they decided to send this out. If there was a positive, they have this and they can retest it if need be.
All right, so if you could make sure I understand this, the jury understands it. So they get the urine sample. Mm-hmm. Is that a yes? You need to say yes or no
yes.
Instead of
yeah.
Okay. And then they test it.
Yes.
Okay, and then they send it off to confirm that test?
Yes, they will send it down to our lab at SOMC and test the urine.
I have what's been marked as State's Exhibit 3. Can you see that okay from over there?
Yes.
And what is State's Exhibit 3?
This is further testing and the amount that was found in the urine.
All right. So is this the result after they send the urine down to the lab for testing?
Yes.
Okay. And so we see the same columns to the left, a little bit different writing. And then on the right side, we see the result. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And did State's Exhibit 3, did the lab confirm the positive results?
Yes.
Now, we had been discussing the delivery, and you indicated that have you had a number of patients that have delivered under the influence of drugs or alcohol?
Yes, we have.
All right. And have you become familiar with those deliveries by assisting in the deliveries in some way?
Yes.
All right. You indicated that the labor is usually smoother or easier.
Yes, it is.
Were there any differences between those kinds of cases of labor with those under addiction and Ms. Groves? Is there anything different about hers versus theirs?
Yes, there was. I mean, some characteristics of the delivery were typical, but even mothers who present to us under the influence of drugs will usually give us enough information when we are telling them. We told her multiple times, we just want to know so we can help your baby. We need to be prepared to take care of your baby. And she was still very uncooperative and would not give us an answer. We do this just to be ready for any of the care that the baby will need, not to punish or incriminate the mother in any way. So this was very unlike what we are used to. This delivery stood out to us very vividly for this reason. We could not get anyone to cooperate with our care, the care we wanted to provide. So yes, in that sense, it was very different.
Physically, is there still indicia of pain exhibited by the people delivering the mothers, or with the case of addicted parents, is that not as big an issue?
Usually, yes, there will still be, towards the end, I'm not sure there's much that masks the very end of labor, but in this case, no, there was not much inclination of her being in pain.
Do you recall, ma'am, how long it was from when Ms. Groves came to the hospital to birth?
Jessica presented us at 5:25 a.m. in the morning, and she delivered at 5:54 that same morning.
So roughly 30 minutes.
Yes.
Was there any complications with the delivery from the child's perspective?
No.
Did you have an opportunity to see the child after delivery?
Yes, I did. After he was delivered, they laid him on the mother's chest for a brief second and then took him to the warmer. Due to, unknown Hep C status, we usually give the babies baths immediately just to be safe, and he ended up needing oxygen, so they transferred him to the nursery.
Why is that important in these circumstances to be aware of Hep C?
When a mother has admitted to drug use, we try to be on the safe side. If a mother is Hep C positive, has admitted this to us, or has tested positive, we give the babies a bath right after delivery, so there is a minimal risk to the infant. And since we did not know in this case, but we knew drug history was a factor stated by the husband, we went ahead and gave him a bath. Nursery staff did.
Arm approach. Your Honor, let the record reflect on showing opposing counsel what has been marked as State's Exhibit 4.
No objection, Your Honor.
And I'm going to trace it here.
Okay.
Let the record reflect on handing the witness what has been marked as State's Exhibit 4. Ma'am, take a moment and look through that if you would.
Okay.
Ma'am, what is that? What have I handed you as marked State's Exhibit 4?
This is the medical record of Dylan Groves.
Does this appear to be a true and accurate, complete copy of the medical records maintained by Southern Ohio Medical Center for Dylan Groves?
Yes, it does.
And are these the medical records of the Dylan Groves that Jessica Groves gave birth to on January 10th, 2019?
Yes.
You testified briefly about the delivery, that you were there. Were there any complications with the baby as a result of the delivery?
No.
Were there any physical injuries to the child?
No.
Did the baby have any complications as a result, potentially, of the mother's drug use?
Potentially, yes. When the baby was born, it was charted that he was dusky and pale, not breathing well, he was retracting. These are things we usually see after excessive drug use in an infant.
In those situations, what's the protocol that is in place for a child born?
Usually nursery staff will take the infant right to the warmer, do an assessment, and if need be, take the infant to the nursery where we can administer oxygen and do further testing and evaluation.
Were there any tests conducted on baby Dylan?
I stayed with the mother at that point, so that I'm not aware of.
Okay. From your review of the medical record, were there any tests conducted by baby Dylan? For baby Dylan?
Let me look and see. Yes, initially they would have done like APGAR scoring on him when he was first born, and then after that they took him immediately to the nursery and placed him on oxygen. So any testing would have been on hold for a moment.
Okay. Ma'am, have you heard the term postpartum?
Yes, I have.
What's that refer to in the hospital setting?
In our hospital setting, postpartum is after the mother delivers. She transfers from like a laboring patient or antepartum to postpartum care. Is a mother and baby couplet.
Thank you. So what's the typical postpartum scenario for a mother and child after delivery?
Typically, after delivery, the infant is placed right on the mother's chest. We encourage skin to skin. Mothers are allowed to do this as long as they wish. After that, usually the infants are swaddled so family can pass the baby around, hold the baby. Siblings will come watch a bath, things like that.
Now, in this case, were there differences as a result of the baby's condition?
Yes, there was. Because of how Dylan acted when he was born, he was taken to the nursery and put on oxygen. And after that, Jessica or Daniel did not request to see him.
You indicated earlier that Dylan was briefly laid on Jessica. What's the purpose of that?
Usually that is typical. We lay the infant directly on the mother's chest. It's best for them to, feel the mother, be on the mother for temperature reasons. And then almost immediately after, they realized that he was not acting like a normal newborn. So then they took him to the warmer.
Did you have the opportunity to observe Jessica's demeanor at that point in time?
Yes, I did.
What was her demeanor like?
Almost the same as she presented. In the sense of a brand new baby, not interested.
At that point in time, just after delivery, did the mother have any medical complications?
No, she did not.
Did she have any, to your knowledge, later that day?
Yes, she did.
What did she have later that day?
Later in the day, she had a postpartum hemorrhage.
How many hours from birth was that, to your knowledge?
Roughly 4 hours after.
What were your duties after the delivery?
Usually after the delivery, we stay with the mothers to assess their well-being. Even if the infant stays or goes, we stay with mother to watch for things like that, make sure there's not going to be a postpartum hemorrhage, to initiate breastfeeding. Any concerns of the mother we address.
Was there any request by the mother to have Dylan brought back to her at this time?
No, there was not.
Was there any request by the mother to go to the nursery?
No, there was not.
I'd like to direct your attention to Mr. Groves throughout this process. Do you recall observations of Mr. Groves when he first came into the hospital?
Yes, I do.
What were those observations?
He seemed worried and almost afraid.
All right. Did he do any interactions with you with regard? Where was he at when you were asking Ms. Groves all these questions about her condition?
He was directly next to her in triage, and when we moved her to the labor room, whenever we were questioning her, they were both just making eye contact with each other, not acting like they were paying much attention to us until he finally gave us an answer about the drug use.
All right. And did he provide additional information after that?
The only thing that was stated to me by him was that she had used heroin and that she was always too high to go to her prenatal care visits. When they thought about going, she was too high.
You can speak up, okay? You got a soft voice, and they need to hear you in the back of the courtroom.
Okay. The only thing that he said to us was that she had used heroin 2 days ago, and that when they would want to go to her prenatal care visit, she was always too high to go.
Where was Mr. Groves at during delivery?
Directly next to Jessica.
Okay. Did anything stand out to you about his demeanor at delivery?
Yes, just in the sense that we thought he was almost looking to her for permission to answer our questions. I could tell a couple of times he wanted to say things or answer, and he did not.
I'm not sure the jury was able to pick up all that. Could you repeat your answer?
Yes. He was looking to Jessica for permission, it seemed to us. He would look at her when we would ask questions and we thought he was going to answer what we would say, and not until we told him that it was only for baby. We only wanted to know so we could take care of their baby, was that he answered and allowed us to be clued into her drug use.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity to observe Mr. Groves after the delivery?
Yes.
What was he doing then?
After delivery, they both became almost consumed with each other. They were both just making eye contact, and neither one asked about the baby or walked over to the warmer to see the baby or followed to the nursery to go with him.
Is this typical from your observations of births?
No, it is not.
Were you ever in the nursery as part of your duties?
No, I was not.
Did you have any other interactions with Mr. or Mrs. Groves after the stuff we talked about today?
No, after her delivery and after they took Dylan to the nursery, we stayed and finished up with some of her care and finished her admission screen. And that is when she told us things like she did not have a car seat for the infant or anywhere safe for him to sleep. Those are things we screened for. And other than following up with her care like that, no, I did not have any interaction with them.
What was her affect when she was discussing the things she would need for the baby?
Almost the same. The whole general vibe, or almost her behavior that we got, was this, that she did not care.
And again, this happened January 10th, 2019?
Yes, it did.
About a year ago? Have you had hundreds of deliveries or procedures done between now and then?
Yes, we have.
I've noticed you haven't referred to the notes very much at all. Why does this stick out in your mind?
I do think it speaks volumes that all of us that cared for Jessica and Dylan remember this so vividly. The labor, the characteristics of the mother, the unattachment to a brand new baby is very out of the normal for what we see. Even mothers that present to us and are under the influence, they almost always want to hold their babies. They still want what's best for their babies, regardless of their state at that time. And I think what stuck out to us most is that there was just no concern for the infant at that time. It was seemed to be concerned for herself and her state at that time.
What about the father? I know fathers kind of just bumble around in this whole process. Is there anything unusual about his demeanor in this case?
Somewhat, yes. I think to us, we had thought that Daniel wanted to be more involved than what he was allowed to be.
Thank you, ma'am. No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Timpton, Mr. Scratch, are you going first?
Yes, Your Honor.
Cross-examine.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good morning, Ms. Lyles. I want to talk a little bit about your observations of Jessica.
Okay.
How did you describe it earlier?
She was very flat, disconnected, and very uncooperative with us.
Would you consider her to be belligerent?
No, I would not.
Okay. Would you consider Daniel to be belligerent during your interactions with him?
No, I would not.
Okay. When you say they were not interested in Dylan, talk about that a little more. Was that just because they didn't ask to go see him, or?
No, usually when a baby is born, there's excitement, there's laughter, people are crying. a very happy vibe in the room. You know, the mothers are rubbing the baby and watching what they're doing. We've had mothers who are not using drugs that their babies have to be taken to the warmer for a short period of time or for further evaluation. Usually they'll set up in the bed or ask what's going on with the baby. Fathers will step over to the warmer to be next to the baby to watch, or there's picture taking, things like that.
From your experience, did it seem to you that Jessica was a drug user or was using drugs?
It seemed to me that she was using drugs.
Okay. From your experience and her demeanor or observations?
Both her demeanor and and my observations.
Okay. When you have somebody that typically comes in that's been using drugs, what's the difference between what typically happens in the situation here, or are they the same?
Typically, when we've had patients come in complete before that are using drugs, and typically when we ask questions, you know, who is your physician, or have you had prenatal care, even if they have not had any prenatal care, they tell us why, or they will tell us, you know, I think I'm this far along. They give us more kind of a history of their pregnancy or what they've known of their pregnancy, and we were not given any information in this case, so not typical.
You said Daniel seemed worried and afraid of what?
He seemed worried about Jessica,
Okay.
and then when we were asking questions, it seemed to us that he wanted to answer, but was worried of the repercussion maybe if he gave us the information that she was not giving.
Okay, so he was worried about the repercussions, correct?
Yes, from her.
Okay. And he appeared to be wanting to answer your questions, but was reluctant.
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Stratton, Ms. Scott, you may cross examine.
I believe that Mr. Stratton covered some of the material that I wanted to cover with you as well. Your basic description of Jessica Groves was that she was uncooperative during this whole entire time, correct?
Yes.
You also mentioned that Daniel Groves did finally at some point in time fess up or confess and stated that he believed that his wife had consumed heroin at least 2 days prior to the birth.
Yes.
Although she didn't test positive for that, that's what he believed.
Yes.
And stated to you. Okay. Then you also described additional, even after the birth, that she remained uncooperative, even when asked, hey, we just need to help your baby, we need to know what's going on. So this pattern of uncooperativeness seemed to continue, is that correct?
Yes, it did.
And then you also described some behavior on behalf of Daniel that appeared as if he was worried and almost afraid, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then you also described behavior that almost looked like he was looking for permission to be able to answer these questions from Jessica Groves. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So he appeared to be wanting to be cooperative, correct?
Correct.
And there was some kind of connection, some kind of threat, or some kind of perceived problem that would be caused if he was cooperative with you. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what we got. We didn't see Jessica do or say anything to him to tell him to stop. That is just sort of the
vibe you got.
Yes.
Okay. That's what you picked up from him.
Yes.
Okay. And you felt, I believe that your words were that you felt that Daniel wanted to be more involved in this process, but I wasn't for sure what word you exactly used, but almost as if Jessica's presence there and her control over him was almost intimidating him. Yes. and not answering the question, correct?
Correct.
And almost as if he would suffer some repercussions if he was honest and forthright, correct?
Correct.
Do you know, or did you have any discussions with him when he actually learned that Jessica was actually pregnant and carrying their child?
No, I did not.
Okay. I know that you mentioned that he mentioned not attending prenatal appointments because she would be too intoxicated.
Yes.
But you do not know when he actually learned that she was pregnant with her child, correct?
No, I do not.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's all I have this time.
Ms. Scott, Mr. Teeman, any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. Thank you, Ms. Lyles.
Is this witness excused?
She is.
Defense excused her also.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Ma'am, you're free to go. Yes, if you go into the bailiff.
Okay.
Mr. Teeman, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, the state will call Tori Howe.
Sorry, Ms. Hutchinson. Ma'am, will you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Ma'am, please have a seat. Ma'am, we do have media in the courtroom here today. Do you have any objection to your image being filmed or photographed during your testimony? All right. Now, you speak quietly. You're going to need to speak up real loud for the court reporter. Okay? Ms. Hutchinson, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. If you would introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for our record.
Hi, my name is Tori Howell, H-O-W-E-L-L.
Ms. Howell, how are you employed?
I'm sorry.
How are you employed?
I'm employed by Southern Ohio Medical Center.
Okay. And what is your job title there?
I am currently a labor and delivery nurse. I switched from the nursery, but at this time I was a nursery nurse.
Okay. And how long have you been employed with Southern Ohio Medical Center?
Since June of 2017.
Okay. And if you would tell the members of the jury what some of your job duties were last year in January of 2019 as a nursery nurse.
So as a nursery nurse, we would go to the deliveries. We would take care of the baby at delivery. The baby needed extra help breathing. We would, try to resuscitate it. We would do the baths. We would do Finnegan assessments.
Let me interrupt you just for a second.
Yes.
What is a Finnegan assessment?
It's a Finnegan, it's a neonatal abstinence syndrome assessment that's done every 4 hours on every baby who has drug abuse, in its system or a history of it with the mom. And we do those every 4 hours to assess the baby, see how it's doing on its withdrawal symptoms.
Okay. What are some of the other things that you do as a nursery nurse with babies? Assessments or evaluations?
We sign the babies on 3 times a day. We do the baths. Just different things. We have babies on Optiflow oxygen sometimes.
Okay. Are there evaluations or assessments that you do sometimes to determine the gestational age of the baby?
Yes.
Okay, explain that to the jury.
That's a Ballard assessment. So whenever the baby is born, every baby gets this done. We do a Ballard assessment. So depending on how the baby looks, just different features, if their wrist bends, how their wrist bends, if it bends far back or not enough, we can determine about how far along the baby was gestationally.
Okay. So how long the mom was pregnant?
Yes.
Okay. What other types of assessments do you all do there as part of the nursery?
We do vital assessments, the Finnegans.
Okay. Let me direct your attention to January 2019. Were you working on the evening of January 9th and the morning of January 10th?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity to assist in the medical treatment of a patient named Jessica Groves and her newborn Dylan Groves?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have an independent recollection of that? Do you remember this incident?
Yes.
Okay. Explain to the members of the jury how you became involved in this treatment.
So around 5:45 that morning, our charge nurse from labor and delivery called back to the nursery. The nursery is like a separate unit, kind of. We're all maternity, but labor and delivery is out front and nursery is separate in the back. We have a room that's enclosed. It's a locked unit.
Let me interrupt you just for a second. You have a locked unit back there. Explain that to the jury and what's the purpose of that?
So the nursery is a locked unit. It's just so that people can't get in or out with babies, that our babies are protected in the nursery, because people bring their babies over to sleep and to do different assessments and things like that. So
Okay, so delivery takes place, you said, out front?
Yes, delivery takes place in the labor and delivery rooms.
And then the babies, if they're separated from the mothers, would be taken to a locked unit in the nursery in the back?
Yes.
Okay. And I think I'd ask you how you became involved with this particular patient, but before we get there, let me back up just a minute. Are there, I guess this is not really a good term, but kits that you guys use when you get a call saying we have a mom getting ready to deliver a baby?
Yes, so we have little buckets that just kind of have like hats, blankets, diapers, things like that to get so that we're ready for delivery in any amount of time. We're always ready.
Okay, so once you get that call from out front, you grab your little buckets and pre-made buckets and go to the front?
Yes.
Okay. Explain to the members of the jury what typically happens once you arrive there, what your job is out there in maternity or delivery.
So once we get to the room for a delivery, we set up and make sure that our warmer is ready so that we have all of our items ready for resuscitation if we need it. I like to just make sure that all my stuff's ready, get my blankets set up, make sure they're warm underneath the warmer. There's a radiant warmer to stick the baby underneath.
What's the purpose of that radiant warmer?
To keep the baby warm.
Okay, keep his body temperature up? All right. And so you were explaining to the members of the jury the call you got in regards to the treatment of Jessica Groves. Go ahead there.
So we got the call about 5:40. We grabbed our bucket, Courtney and I, and we went to the delivery. Whenever we got there, she was being transferred from the triage bed to the regular labor and delivery bed. And we just continued to set up our supplies.
Okay. Before you arrived there, were you provided any information regarding this patient from the nurse that called you?
She literally said, "Hey, it's Jessica. We have a patient going to room 1. She's complete. Come on." And I said, "Okay."
When you say complete, what does that mean?
She's ready to deliver. She's dilated 10 centimeters and 100% effaced.
Okay. When you got there, who did you see?
I saw Jessica Groves and her husband.
Okay.
I saw Jessica Shaw, Darian Lyles, Megan Sadler, Amanda Jones.
Okay. These other people are those nurses?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what's everybody doing in there? Describe what that atmosphere is as you enter the room there.
It's tense. Everybody is kind of trying to get things ready. You know, there's certain things that you have to do before delivery to get the room ready, to get the patient ready. So everybody's just trying to get everything ready before the doctor gets there. And
if you would describe to the members of the jury the defendant Jessica Groves' demeanor as you come in.
Whenever I came into the room, she was just laying in where she was being transferred to the bed, but she was like moaning. I didn't hear her say any words, but she was just like moaning in the bed. Like she was annoyed that she was there. She just acted like she didn't want to be there, anywhere but there.
Okay. You said you've been at Southern Ohio Medical Center since 2017? Okay. And that you're a registered nurse. You've been in maternity and in the nursery. Have you had an opportunity throughout that time to observe mothers who are under the influence as they come in to deliver their babies?
Yes.
Did you see or make any of those observations as it relates to Jessica Groves?
Yes.
Okay. Explain that to the jury.
She just appeared high whenever she was in the bed, just moaning, like she wasn't in pain, but she was just annoyed that she was there.
Okay. Were there any pain meds given to defendant Jessica Groves as far as you know?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Explain to the members of the jury the delivery. Were you there when that baby was delivered?
Yes.
Okay. How quickly did that occur?
Well, I'm not exactly sure on the time, but I remember waiting at the warmer for Dr. Adams to get there because it took him, he was at home, so he had to be called in. So it took a few minutes for him to come in.
Okay. But would you consider this a quick delivery from the time you arrived to the time that this baby was born?
Yes.
Okay. And what is it that you do with baby Dylan once he's born?
Once he's born, because she came in the way she was acting, we didn't know her Hep C status. So either way, whether the baby had respiratory distress or not, I was going to bring the baby over to the warmer no matter what. So As soon as the baby was born, the cord was cut. We brought the baby over to the warmer to make further assessments and give the baby a quick bath before we would do anything else with it. We did not give it a bath at that point. The baby was having some respiratory distress issues, so we ended up evaluating the baby there and assessing the baby and taking it over to the nursery.
Okay, when you say respiratory distress, you mean the baby was having trouble breathing?
Yes.
Okay, and so you removed the baby from the room and took him to the nursery. Did either parent go to the nursery with this baby? Did either parent ask about the condition of this baby as you removed him from the room? Okay. What do you do with baby Dylan once you get him back to the nursery?
Once we got him back to the nursery, I believe we set him up on Optiflow. Sometimes it just helps, it's kind of pressure, like oxygen, and it just goes through nasal prongs through their nose, and it just helps the baby's lungs expand and helps them get to have a regular breathing system.
Okay. At some point, do you, using the evaluations we spoke of earlier, determine what his gestational age was? Okay, explain to the jury how you did that and what you found in doing so.
So there are just different assessment tools that we use, like I said, just like how their wrist bends, different things like that. And we determined that the baby's gestational age was 36 weeks.
Okay, and full gestational age is what?
40 weeks.
40 weeks, okay, so he was approximately a month early?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Would that contribute to his breathing difficulty?
Yes, that's typical for a 36-weeker to have respiratory distress issues at delivery.
Okay. And explain to the members of the jury, in your work there at Southern Ohio Medical Center in the nursery and as a maternity nurse, have you seen babies who are exposed to drugs?
Yes, absolutely.
How often would you say you see that?
I would say just about every day.
Just about every day. Okay. Explain to the members of the jury what symptoms or signs babies who are exposed to drugs exhibit.
Just different things. Tremors, either disturbed or undisturbed, meaning if you would disturb the baby would have tremors, or even just laying there, the baby would have tremors. Sneezing, temperatures, sweating, loose stools. They can have diarrhea, even with the meconium that babies usually have right after they're born. Just different things like that.
Okay. And throughout baby Dylan's stay there at the hospital, was he observed to have symptoms of drug withdrawal?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. You would have had a shift change sometime that morning, is that right? Mm-hmm. About what time was that?
Around 7 o'clock, the day shift comes on.
Okay. 7 a.m. you said?
7 a.m., yeah.
Okay. And the birth was shortly before 6 a.m.?
Yes.
Okay. During that time frame, do either parent appear at the nursery asking about the condition of the baby or asking to see the baby?
No.
Okay. When you left the room with baby Dylan, was mom okay? Stable?
As far as I knew, yes. Yeah, I wasn't really paying attention just because I was worried about the baby, but yes.
Okay. Let me take a little, just sidetrack you a little bit about a procedural issue. As part of the regular, everyday interactions there at Southern Ohio Medical Center, do you all maintain records for each patient that comes in?
Yes.
Okay. And those are kept every day in the normal course of business for each patient that you see?
Yes.
Okay. Let me hand you what's previously been marked as State's Exhibit 4 for identification.
Okay.
Do you recognize the documents that I just handed you?
Yes.
Okay. What are those?
These are Dylan Groves medical records.
Okay. And how do you know that those records belong to Dylan Groves?
Because they have his name, his date of birth, his medical record number, his visit number, all that kind of stuff. All that patient identifiers that we use to identify a patient.
Okay. And if you wouldn't mind to just flip through those and then tell the jury whether or not you believe those to be a true and accurate representation of the care that was given there for Dylan Groves while he was there at the hospital.
I've looked through the chart many times.
I'm sorry?
I've looked through it many times.
Okay. Through this particular chart?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to hand you what's going to be marked as State's Exhibit 5 for identification. State's Exhibit 5 and ask you if you recognize that record individually.
Yes.
Okay, what is that?
This is Dylan Groves' urine drug screen profile.
Okay, and is that a part of something that was taken from this whole record, complete
Yes.
record?
Yes.
Okay, I might put that up on the screen for the jury to see. Okay, and I think you said earlier, you can identify these records, the patient's name, the patient's date of birth, and then they also have a medical record number associated with each patient, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so if you would explain to the members of the jury what this is and what it indicates.
So the baby was positive, had an unconfirmed positive for amphetamines.
Okay. And if there's an unconfirmed positive test for amphetamines or any other drug, what happens then?
So then we do our Finnegan assessments on the baby if the baby has a positive drug screen. Because there was no prenatal care in this case, she was not able to have drug screens during her pregnancy, so we always get a urine on baby if there's no prenatal care visits. So once we got the urine drug screen and it was positive, we started doing our Finnegan assessments every 4 hours and started evaluating the baby for withdrawal symptoms.
Okay. And is there a process that the hospital uses to confirm those pre-screens, so to speak? Do they send it on for a confirmation screening?
Yes, I believe they do. Yeah.
Okay. Let me hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 6.
Yes.
Okay. And how do you recognize them?
This is the baby's cord drug panel that we sent off.
Okay. Let me put this up on the screen.
Should this defense counsel discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. So State's Exhibit 6 also identifies the patient by name, which is baby Dylan Groves, the date of birth, and then looks like several substances that would go to the lab and be further tested. Is that right? Okay. And if you would look down through there and explain to the jury which ones show a positive screen.
So, looks like the positives were amphetamines, methamphetamines, fentanyl, opiates, morphine, and I think that's it. I can't really read it very well.
It's farther away from you, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. And if I might hand you lastly State's Exhibit 7 for identification of the record that I'm showing defense counsel. You would explain to the members of the jury what the hospital does with the baby's umbilical cord at that point.
So, at every delivery, we get a cord sample. So the doctor will cut us off a piece of the cord, and we only send that if there's drug use suspected or if we get a positive. So at this point, we put it in a box, we seal it up, and we send it off to get the drug screen results from the cord.
An outside lab also looks at it?
Yes.
Okay. And then is the hospital notified as the result?
Yes.
And does that then become a part of the patient's record?
Yes.
Okay. If I hand you State's Exhibit 7, ask you if you recognize that.
Yes.
Okay. And what is that?
This is the piece of paper that comes across the printer in the nursery every time that a drug screen or cord screen comes back.
Okay. So for State's Exhibit 7, the nursery would receive notification from an outside lab about the results of the cord, is that right?
Yes,
Okay. And I don't know, can you see that?
a little bit.
Let me see if I can zoom in there.
Yeah, I can see that better.
You would explain to the members of the jury what's revealed in the cord test.
The baby was positive for amphetamines, methamphetamines, fentanyl, opiates, and morphine.
There looks like there are subsections under opiates that show positive, morphine and a hydromorphine.
Okay, yes.
Let me hand that back to you so you can
Sorry.
see that it close. That's okay.
Yes, positive for the morphine.
Okay. What type of treatment does SOMC provide to babies who are subjected to substances like this?
So with the fitting assessments, we do them every 4 hours. And if a baby at that time got over an 8 score 3 times in a row, we would start the baby on our morphine withdrawal protocol.
Okay. To your knowledge, was baby Dylan bottle fed or breastfed?
Bottle fed.
Okay. To your knowledge, was there any request from the mother to have her baby back in her room or hold the baby?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. If I could have just a second, Your Honor. I think that's all I have at this time, Your Honor.
Ms. Hutchinson, Mr. Stratton, you may cross-examine the witness.
Good morning, Mrs. Howe. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. You mentioned earlier about the signs of exposure for a baby who's been exposed to drugs. You mentioned tremors, sneezing. Probably going to have to say yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry, yes.
The recording. So, and other signs like that. But what signs did Dylan exhibit?
So after delivery, normally the symptoms don't show up.
Okay.
Until 24, 48, 72 hours after delivery.
Okay.
So I don't believe that I exhibited any of those symptoms that he had.
Okay. You also talked a little bit about Jessica's demeanor. You said she was moaning. Any idea why?
I thought she was just annoyed that we were asking her questions.
Okay. It wasn't moaning in pain?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Why didn't you think it was moaning in pain?
She just didn't act like a normal labor patient. She didn't act like she was in a whole lot of pain.
Okay. You also said she acted like she didn't want to be there, correct? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And that she appeared high?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Tell me a little bit more about that. How did she act like she didn't want to be there? What did she do?
So typically whenever we have a patient who comes in and they appear to be high, typically that patient will let us know the drugs that they've taken, when they took them, because they want us to take care of their baby the best way that we know how. They want us to be fully prepared, and she did not do this.
She didn't ask you anything, didn't tell you anything?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Stratton. Ms. Scott, you may cross-examine the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Powell. Hi.
When you stated that you described a lot of the behavior in regards to Jessica Groves. Did you have much interaction with Daniel Groves on that day?
Not much, no.
Okay. Did he attempt to answer any questions for you all when you as part of the staff or whatever was asking in regards to drug usage on behalf of the mom? Did he attempt to answer any of the questions for you?
I think that he did end up answering a couple questions for them, but I didn't get those answered relayed until I was already back in the nursery, just because everything happened so quickly.
Okay, got you. You stated that the birth was shortly before 6 a.m., is that correct?
Yes.
And your shift ended at 7 a.m., is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. Were you on shift the next day?
I don't know.
Okay. So do you have any independent memory of how much time you actually interacted with these parents? Other than that almost hour to and a half of time on this particular day, the day of Dylan's birth?
I don't know exactly a time frame, how many days I was there while the baby was in the nursery. But I do remember, in the nursery we don't really have assignments. We kind of just jump around and do things as they need to be done.
Sure.
And so I do remember being in there whenever they were in there later on.
So on a later shift, on a different day, the parents were in the nursery with the baby?
I just remember the dad being there, not the
The
mom.
dad was in there for the baby? Okay. And the baby was there for several days, is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, but you do recall the dad being in the nursery with the baby on one of your later shift on a later day, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Any redirect, Ms. Hutchins?
Just a few. You said earlier you took this baby out of the room because he wasn't breathing well.
Yes.
Did Daniel Groves follow you down the hall and ask about his baby?
No.
Over the next hour, did Daniel Groves appear and ask about that baby?
No.
Where was he when you left?
He was at the bedside with Jessica.
No further questions.
Mr. Stratton, any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Scott, any recross?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
Did Daniel seem concerned about his wife and his wife's health condition right after delivering the baby?
I honestly don't know. I wasn't paying much attention. I was more concerned with the baby and its health.
And if there was something going on with the mother and her medical condition, would it be atypical for the spouse to stay there with the other spouse and the baby being taken care of by medical staff? Would that be atypical?
It's really just personal preference. People do it different ways all the time.
So it's a split decision. It's kind of like, do you go with the baby or do you stay with your spouse? And it is a personal decision. So it's not atypical for that period of time that he would have remained with his wife versus going with the baby, correct?
I guess, yes.
The medical staff had the baby, correct? Well, in good hands, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And he may have just chosen to stay with his wife to see what kind of medical concerns she had going on.
That could be possible, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Any other questions for this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Is this witness excused by the state,
Yes, Your Honor.
by the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Scott, is she excused?
Excuse, thank you, Your Honor.
And you're free to go. Thank you very much. Council approach. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to get a couple more witnesses on before our lunch break. That now might be a good time to take a short recess. I am going to remind you of my earlier admonition to you. Do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Do not permit anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. It is your duty not to form or express an opinion on this case until the full case is finally submitted to you. This time we will take a recess. I will tell you that as soon as the jury is ready to come back to the courtroom, me and the lawyers will be ready to start back. This time, court is recessed.
You can leave your notebook and your pen there on the chair.
Daniel Groves in State of Ohio versus Jessica Groves, case numbers 19 CR 586 A and B. Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is the defense ready to proceed?
We are, Your Honor. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. The state may call their next witness.
Your Honor, the state would call Kristen Proctor France.
Raise your right hand for me, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Ma'am, please have a seat. Now, ma'am, there is media here in the courtroom this afternoon. Do you have any objection if they film or photograph your image during your testimony? All right. Ms. Hutchinson, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, if you would, introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for our record.
Kristen Proctor France, PROCTER FRANTZ.
Ms. France, what is your occupation?
I'm a social worker at Southern Ohio Medical Center.
Okay. And how long have you been so employed?
5.5 years, 6 years in June.
Okay. Were you employed in social work prior to that?
Yes.
Your employment with SOMC?
I've had my master's since 2011, so master's in social work since 2011, so I've been a social worker for 9 years.
Okay. I'm going to need you to speak up just a little bit so we can hear you back here. If you would explain to the members of the jury what some of your job duties are as a social worker for Southern Ohio Medical Center.
Currently, I'm working in the emergency department, so we do psychosocial assessments on those with mental illness, do substance use assessments on those that come in under the influence of drugs. We do CPS referrals on kids that come in that we need to make referrals on. On the inpatient floors, we do discharge planning, set patients up with things they need like medical equipment, nursing home placements, that kind of thing. On the maternity floors, we're consulted for various reasons. Adoption cases, moms with history or current substance use during their pregnancy, 3 or less prenatal visits, just anytime the nurses have any concerns regarding the care of the baby with the parents, various other reasons.
Okay.
Can you just ask her to talk a little bit more, with like Rose's back here is a little bit more.
You see the deputy in the back of the courtroom?
Yes.
Your volume needs to be so he can hear you clear back there. Okay?
Thank you.
And if you're too loud, no one's going to complain.
Let me direct your attention to the timeframes of January 10th to January 15th, 2019. Were you working as a social worker at Southern Ohio Medical Center at that time?
I was working in the emergency department that weekend on January 12th and January 13th.
Okay. And did you have an opportunity to receive a referral from the nursery regarding baby Dylan Groves?
On January 13th, I received a call from the nursery stating baby Dylan was ready for discharge and they needed to know what the plan was for discharge. I reviewed mom's medical chart, the documentation from the social worker, the drug screens, the things that we review when social work's involved in a case. I seen that CPS hadn't notified us what the plan was, so I called South County CPS.
Let me interrupt you just for a second. What is the goal of social services at that point?
Make sure the baby's discharged to the safest environment.
Okay. And you said you review mother's medical chart? And baby's
Yes.
medical chart? And then any correspondence or notes from other social workers that have been on staff or on shift?
Yes.
Okay. And you said as a result of that you contacted Children's Services?
Yes.
Okay. If you would explain to the members of the jury why you contacted them.
One of the other social workers did the maternal substance use assessment because mom was positive, didn't have prenatal care. So we did the assessment, we made a referral to CPS. The on-call social worker that day was Lauren Johnson. She called me back and said that she had been on the unit for 5 hours on Friday with the father.
Let me interrupt you just for a second. You said you guys do a maternal substance use assessment. Explain to the jury what that is.
We ask their use during pregnancy. Do they have everything they need for the baby? Their mental health history. Are they breast or bottle feeding? Do they have other kids? Do they have prior CPS involvement? Various things like that. Find out their history.
Okay. And are the answers to those questions kept in a medical record or document at the hospital?
Mom's chart under maternal substance use assessment form.
Okay. And was that done in this case?
Yes.
Okay. Let me hand you what's previously been marked as State's Exhibit 4. Actually, State's Exhibit 1. And ask you if you recognize these exhibits. So we have 1 and 4.
I'm going to lay them to the side. This microphone feeds into her headset, so if you could be gentle with. All right.
You first look at State's Exhibit 1 for identification.
This is Mom's medical chart.
Okay, and how do you recognize that as the mother's medical chart?
This is what we review whenever we get a consult on a mom or a baby in maternity or nursery at the hospital.
Okay, and is that the format in which all patient medical records are kept?
Yes.
Okay. Is there an identifying patient name and number there?
Yes.
Okay. And do they identify as the defendant, Jessica Groves?
Yes.
Okay. And you said the maternal substance abuse assessment would be in her record, is that right? Can you locate that within that folder?
Okay.
Okay. And if you would explain to the members of the jury what information you're asking for and what information you're receiving in regards to that assessment.
Mary Jo Halter, another social worker at SOMC, did the initial meeting with Mom. She asked where she lives, the father's name, other children, their other children's names and ages, anybody else living in the home, if there's a history of CPS involvement, the history of the father as regarding to substance abuse, domestic violence, mom's substance abuse treatment history, and current use currently or during any time during the pregnancy or previously, mental health and psychiatric treatment history, financial legal problems, participation in care with a newborn, bonding with a newborn. We usually get that information from the nursery staff and maternity staff if they have any concerns whatsoever with mom and baby. And then we document our recommendations. In this case, we made a referral to CPS.
Okay, let me take you back to substance abuse history by the mother, reported by the mother. If you would explain to the members of the jury what was reported in her medical record regarding substance abuse.
It says that she says she is done with drugs and doesn't need treatment.
Okay. Why do you guys take that information? What's the purpose of taking substance abuse history?
So we know what the mom's count of her drug abuse history is.
Okay. And does any of that relate to the care of the baby or the safety of the baby as far as
yeah, so we know if the mom
concerned?
has exposed the baby to substance use during her pregnancy.
Okay. And you said that you guys contacted Children's Services.
Yes.
Okay. What concerns did Southern Ohio Medical Center Social Services have in relation to the safety of the discharge of baby Groves?
Mom and baby both were positive at delivery and birth. So we know that if there are 2 positives during pregnancy or birth delivery, then it should warrant a custody removal of the infant. And we did not feel it was safe for the baby to be discharged home to mom when she was actively using throughout her pregnancy, and the mom and baby both were positive at the hospital.
Okay. And so what efforts did Social Services make to ensure safe discharge of baby Dylan?
Mary Jo made the initial referral. CPS didn't let us know what their plan was before the weekend, so when I got the call on Sunday, I called CPS to find out what their plan was. Lauren told me that she had been on the unit with the dad for 5 hours on that Friday, and safety planned baby to go home with dad, and said that she drug tested him and he was clean, and that he told her that he did not know about mom's drug use during pregnancy.
Okay. Was Social Services at Southern Ohio Medical Center satisfied with that discharge?
No. I told her that wasn't appropriate, that we would hold the baby until we got the umbilical cord results were back, because with mom and baby both being positive, it should be an automatic removal. So I told Lauren that, talked to the maternity nurses and nursery nurses, and they agreed that we would hold the baby until the cord came back to confirm the positive drug screens.
and let Lauren know that, and then I called my supervisor, Mandy,
Okay.
and discussed it with her.
And what was social services intent in the event that children's services did not agree with you?
We would have called juvenile court Judge Lemons. He would have done what he needed to do to make sure the baby was removed because of the positive drug screens.
Okay, so you were not willing to discharge baby Dylan to Daniel Groves?
No.
If you would take a look at the other exhibit, I believe it's exhibit 4. Identify that for the record.
This is baby Dylan's medical record.
Okay. And if you would, I think there's a Post-it note there. If you would flip to that page and explain to the jury what those documents are.
This is where I documented in baby Dylan's chart under the newborn substance abuse assessment form. It's where we document all this stuff after the mom has been moved off the unit. So this is where my notes start and then follow up with other social workers after me.
Okay, and essentially those notes are a summary of sort of what you testified in here about today, what happened at the hospital, how you became involved?
Yes.
Okay. Are those a true and accurate representation of what took place out there over that 5-day period?
Yes.
Okay. If I could have just a second. I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Mr. Stratton, you may cross-examine the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Proctor. What was the?
France. I got
France.
married after this case.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks.
Let's go back to your interactions with Mrs. Johnson. She is what?
She was the caseworker from Sauter County CPS that was on call the same day that I was involved with this case.
Okay. So you had spoken with her and she had drug tested Daniel, is that correct?
That's what she reported, yes.
She reported to you that she has drug tested Daniel. She wanted to send Dylan home with Daniel?
Yes.
That was against
Our recommendation from Southern Ohio Medical Center, yes.
Now explain that recommendation. Usually, typically, in this situation or similar to this situation, when would you not send a baby home with the father?
When mom and baby both are positive, we don't recommend they go home to the family because dad and mom both are in the house.
Okay. So you've never discharged to a family member in a situation like this? I'm assuming that where we're from, we have quite a few of these situations.
We don't make the final decision, but I couldn't say that that's not happened in the past. But in this case, there was active use in the home. Mom and dad are together living in the home. There was nobody else in the home other than a child, so we did not recommend baby go home with.
Okay. At what point would you have recommended it?
In this case?
Never?
I don't know.
Okay. When Mrs. Johnson said that she was going to send Dylan home with Daniel, what was your reply to her?
Told her that we did not feel that was appropriate and that I would contact my supervisor and discuss with the doctor, but we would likely hold the baby until the U-Cord came back because their issue was the positives on the drug screen said unconfirmed.
Okay. Did she argue with you, give you a hard time about it?
She just said that they can't take those unconfirmed positives as positives. If they would have said just positive, she would have agreed it would have been a custody removal at that time. But because it said unconfirmed, she couldn't say that those were two positives.
So she was wanting to send Dylan home to Daniel without clarifying what was going on?
I guess, yes.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examine.
Yeah, briefly, Your Honor. Thank you.
This is Dr. France. You did learn or have a conversation with Lauren Johnson from Children's Services Board that Daniel Groves participated in a drug screen for their agency, and that drug screen was clean, correct?
That's what she said, yes.
Okay. The hospital did not test him independently, correct? No. Okay. Did you have any personal discussions or observations of Mr. Groves?
No.
Himself? Okay. Did you ascertain whether or not Jessica Groves was going to be absent from the home if the baby was sent with him per Children's Services Board's instructions?
She just told me that he was unaware of her drug use and that he safety planned the baby home with Dad.
And you were not aware of the portion of the safety plan that Jessica Groves would stay?
She said she would have supervised visits.
Right, but she would not be residing in the home?
She didn't tell me that.
Okay. Would that have made a difference to you?
I'm not the one that makes the decisions. But.
Okay. But you did state in your testimony, though, that it was your policy that you weren't going to send this baby home if mom was in the home.
It was our understanding that 2 positives weren't automatic custody removal. That's the way it has been in the past up until the point of our labs changing over and the positive going from saying positive to unconfirmed positive. Nothing had changed otherwise on other babies when there was custody removal in that case.
But if you have a parent who's not testing positive for substance addiction and there is the ability for the other parent who is to stay outside of the home, would that not have been taken into consideration?
That's CPS decision.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Ms. Scott?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Is this witness excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
And you're free to go. State may call their next witness.
State of Ohio will call Mandy Burchett.
And can you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And will you please have a seat? Now, ma'am, there is media in the courtroom today. Do you object to your image being filmed or photographed during your testimony?
I do not object.
You do not. All right. Thank you. Mr. Teeman, you may inquire.
Thank you. Ma'am, would you state your name for the record?
My name is Amanda Rapp Burchett. I go by Mandy Burchett.
All right. And how do you spell Burchett?
Burchett.
All right. And are you employed?
Yes, I'm employed at Southern Ohio Medical Center.
What position are you employed in at Southern Ohio Medical Center?
I'm the manager of social work services.
What's your educational background?
I have my bachelor's degree in psychology from Otterbein College and a master's degree in social work from University of Cincinnati.
How long have you been at Southern Ohio Medical Center?
I began my career there in 1998, and I'm on my 22nd year.
How long have you been the manager of social work services at Southern Ohio Medical Center?
I've been in the manager position a year.
Okay. Approximately what was the date that you started? A year from now, so January of 2019?
I started in maybe October of 18.
Okay, so October 2018.
Over, yes.
Okay. So in January of 2019, you were already a manager of social work at that point?
Yes, I was the manager.
Okay. What are your duties as the manager of social work services at Southern Ohio Medical Center?
I manage the day-to-day operations of our department. We have about 28 social workers. I am available to listen to any of the social workers that might have a question about a patient they're working with or a situation that comes up, to kind of brainstorm what we should do or what the right thing to do is, as well as I do also work in the hospital at times as well as a social worker.
So you actually staff some of the schedule as well?
Yes.
In that capacity? Okay. What types of situations does your department address at SOMC?
We address anything that involves crisis. We have social workers that work in the ER. Social worker is at the hospital from 7 a.m. until 2 a.m. daily, and we're on call from 2 a.m. until 7 a.m. if there was a need. We deal with psychiatric emergencies, substance abuse situations, child abuse and neglect, domestic violence, in addition to just discharge planning, which means a person is leaving the hospital and we assure that they have what they need to be able to take care of themselves at home.
In the course of your duties, did you become familiar with the birth of a Dylan Groves?
Yes, I did.
What was your role with regard to this matter?
I was contacted by Kristen Proctor, a social worker, on telling me the situation in which Dylan was ready to be discharged from the hospital on January the 13th. And she was called by the nursery to ask what the plan was because no one had been notified what the plan that Children's Services had in place. The referral had already been made several days prior.
That's where I was going to go. Let me back you up a little bit as to the protocol. In this type of situation, when do you become involved as the social worker department?
Okay, we're automatically consulted on maternity cases for any mother that's had substance abuse during her pregnancy or a history of substance abuse. We see every mom that has 3 or less prenatal visits. In addition to if there's any concerns of maybe a minor having a baby, any sort of situation that doesn't seem quite right, we just kind of get in there and investigate a little bit.
Okay, so any non-routine family dynamic would be a fair way to say it? Okay. So in this case, when you got involved, the call had already been made to Children's Services?
Correct.
And typically, what's the protocol with the interaction between your agency and Children's Services?
We make the initial referral, and we will wait for Children's Services to call us back with what their intent is, or we will call them if we don't know. We also will notify them of any anticipated discharge. In the situation with our NAS babies, we let them know if their Finnegan scores are going up, if we anticipate that they're going to be started on medicine to help with the withdrawals, and that's our typical process.
Okay, and NAS again means?
Neonatal abstinence syndrome.
Thank you. And was there some type of delay with learning what Children's Services' plan was with regard to baby Dylan?
There was. The nursery called Kristen Proctor. She was working in the emergency department on that Sunday, and she called to ask what the plan was. She called and spoke with Lauren Johnson at Children's Services and was told that the plan was that they had safety planned it and the baby was to go home with the father.
Was there any concern with this relating of a safety plan from your agency, from your department?
We did have concerns. The concern was that the mother and the baby were both positive for methamphetamine, which in my experience as a social worker at the hospital warrants a removal.
Was there any confusion that you were alerted to with regard to the testing process that SOMC did?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. With regard to the testing, the positive drug test results, was there any confusion or misunderstanding as to those kind of results?
What Lauren told Kristen was that because it was an unconfirmed positive screen, that they could not remove custody.
All right, we've had some nurses testify, but can you explain the nature of an unconfirmed positive test at SOMC?
Sure. And I reached out to Bridget Scott, she's the director of our laboratory, so that I'd have an understanding before this happened, actually. And it means the same, so we typically had positive or negative. That's what it said before they changed the machine. The accrediting board that our lab is accredited by, we had to switch the machine. So when we did that, it says unconfirmed pause, or I don't know, it might say negative. I don't want to say for sure. It's probably unconfirmed negative. And both of those tests are the same, positive or unconfirmed positive. What the test does when you do a urine drug screen is it detects that there's a substance present. It does not quantify how much or of the substance is present, just that there is a substance present. And then at that point, we will send the urine off to another lab. In this case, it was Mayo Clinic, to quantify it, to break it down so that we know exactly what was in the urine.
All right. So at the point you're talking with Children's Services, you have an unconfirmed positive from baby Dylan, and an unconfirmed positive from the mother, Mrs. Grove.
Yes.
Okay. And had Children's Services, when did this change in the machine take place, to your knowledge?
It changed on November 11th, 2018.
Okay. So before baby Dylan was born.
Correct.
Was this change, was Children's Services notified of this change in the language of the results?
Soon after we noticed the difference, and I had contacted Bridget Scott, I had called and spoke with one of the Children's Services supervisors to ask if this was going to cause an issue because of the wording.
All right. Was there any indication from Children's Services if this would be an issue for them?
The conversation didn't go any farther than that. It was something that we were going to follow up on in the future. We had not had any problems, so I assumed it was going well because they had removed custody of other children with the same results, 2 unconfirmed positives.
Okay. And then apparently it became an issue with baby Dylan.
It did.
Were you able to get that issue resolved to your satisfaction with Children's Services?
I was the social worker on Sunday is when Kristen got the call, and we did not release the baby. On Monday, I was the social worker, and I called Kelly Burgess, who was the supervisor at Children's Services. I was told by her that they cannot remove custody because of the unconfirmed positive, and that the baby would have to go home with the father. I questioned why that. I questioned that decision because it wasn't based upon decisions that have been made in the past.
Okay. And ultimately, how was the placement resolved?
On Monday, Children's Services was waiting for us to get quantitative results of being either the cord that comes back or the urine, which we had sent out to the lab. And we're talking with their her management, I'm not sure who at Children's Services, to decide what to do. So a decision wasn't made on Monday. On Tuesday, the situation remained the same, where they were not wanting to remove custody, and the baby had been ready since Sunday to leave. And at that point, I asked them to please make a decision by a certain time, and I can't remember the time. And at that point, if a decision to remove the baby had not been made, that I would reach out to our county's juvenile judge, Lemons.
Okay. Tuesday was, I believe, January 15th, to your recollection, is that correct? Okay. Did you receive any confirming results on the 15th?
On the toxicology?
Yes, ma'am.
We did. On that day, we got the cord results back.
And the results were confirmed at that point?
They were confirmed at that point.
So at that point, what happened with regard to baby Dylan?
I wasn't notified from Children's Services after that. Toward the end of the day, I called the nursery and was told that the baby was going to foster care.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. No further questions, Your Honor.
Chairman, Mr. Stratton?
Yes, Your Honor.
Cross-examine the witness.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Person.
Good afternoon.
So, let me just clarify some things here. You presented a lot of information. I just want to sort of get a timeline on how things went.
Okay.
In November of 2018 is when you switched over to this new machine.
Correct.
That changed a positive to either a confirmed positive or an unconfirmed positive.
Correct.
Okay, all right. And that Children's Services had been notified of that change.
I had a conversation with one of the supervisors.
And after that conversation, there had been other children who had been removed on unconfirmed positive tests, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And had there ever been an issue up until Dylan's removal of a problem with unconfirmed positive tests?
There had not been an issue.
Okay. Just generally, how many kids do you think were removed on unconfirmed positive tests?
I don't have any knowledge of that.
Okay, all right. So, Lauren Johnson, have you had many interactions with her? Or is
I
this
have
the first?
had interactions outside of Children's Services.
Okay, is this your first interaction with her with Children's Services?
No.
No, okay, all right. Lauren Johnson said to you that we are not going to remove him on unconfirmed tests. Is that correct?
That is not correct. Kristen Proctor talked to her
Kristen
on Sunday
Proctor.
night,
Okay, but she's relaying that info.
and she relayed that to me.
Okay. Did you have to, I hate to use this word, and I apologize, but did you have to threaten Children's Services that you were going to call the juvenile court to get them to act on a removal of custody?
I had to assure that the baby was safe, knowing that calling the judge is an option if we disagree. We have a protocol in place for that as well. I was going to do that if a decision hadn't been made to remove.
Okay. So you were going to call juvenile court if Children's Services did not remove custody?
Correct.
Okay. All right. But you did not make that call?
I did not, because they removed custody.
Okay. They changed their mind, didn't they?
I don't know if they changed their mind. I don't.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Stratton, Ms. Scott, you may cross-examine.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
As your duties there at the hospital in this manager of social workers or in your social working role, did you have interaction with either Jessica or Daniel Groves yourself personally?
I did not.
Okay, so you did not get any intake information from them?
I did not.
Okay, and your worker, your social worker, Kristen Proctor-France, she was the one that dealt with, mainly with also Children's Services Agency, is that
She's the
correct?
one that dealt with Children's Services that night.
Okay.
Yes.
And do you know if she had any interaction with the parents in forming what you all had decided to do in this case?
She did not have interaction with the parents. We had another social worker that actually did the assessment.
Okay. And then if you did not have any interaction with either of the Groves, and Kristen Proctor-France did not have any interaction with the Groves, you would not have ascertained the information then from Mr. Groves that he could have taken the baby home alone and that Jessica Groves had someplace else to reside.
I was unaware of CPS's plan for that, and I had not spoke to him. We work together as a team with the social work department and the nurses and the staff there, and there is documentation indicating the interaction that the social worker that did assess them had, so I was able to refer to that. But I was not, to answer your question directly, I have not talked to Mr. Groves too.
Okay. So somehow that piece of the information got missed by your department, correct?
It was not missed, it was never told.
Okay. Although Lauren Johnson was communicating directly with Kristen Proctor-France, you're saying that that was not relayed as well to
She
her?
did, on that Sunday night is when we were told what the plan was.
Okay. And that it was for Mr. Groves to take the child home and Mrs. Groves would not reside in the residence?
Correct, and that, yes, she had done a drug test on him and that he had passed.
And so although you had that information on Sunday, you were still not recommending that the child would go home with Mr. Groves?
Correct.
By himself?
Correct.
Although Mrs. Groves would be outside of the residence?
Correct.
And were you aware that he had also passed the drug screen for Children's Services as well?
I cannot recall if that information was relayed to me that following day.
Okay. So the basis that Kristen Proctor-France stated that she was very insistent upon the child not going home is because the baby had a positive screen and mom had a positive screen and the parents were married and would likely live together, correct?
Correct.
However, once you learned that mother would not be present or could not be present in the home, somehow that didn't change
It did not, like, we are a team at the hospital, so while I hadn't met with them personally, I went to the nursery, I had talked to nurses that had interactions with both of them, and they were able to verbalize their concern due to the interaction that they had with Mr. Groves, that this would not be a safe place for the baby to go.
But that was nothing that you obtained personally?
I did not obtain that information personally.
Okay. And are these things that are documented in your assessment and report, these other conversations?
I documented that I had spoke with RN Chantel Spears and the nurse manager, Teresa Ruby, who informed me further of the Children's Services plan, and that I had talked to them to gain information to warrant my calling Children's Services and persisting that the return of the baby to the home was not safe.
But did you document the specific conversations of these individuals about Mr. Groves' interaction with them? Not that they drew that conclusion, but their
Right.
specific conversations.
I did not directly document word for word what they told me.
And why not?
It wasn't something that, I don't know why I did not, but I did
But,
not.
but wasn't it a basis of your conclusion for your insistence that this child not go home with him?
It was, and due to my working many years as a social worker, I trusted what my team was telling me, and that it did not seem that that would be a good choice.
But it wasn't important enough to document what their conversations were.
I did not document it.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, Ms. Scott?
No questions, thank you.
Keenan, any redirect?
No redirect. Thank you, ma'am.
Is this witness free to go?
She is, as far as the state's concerned.
Yes, Your Honor.
Scott?
Yes, thank you.
And you're free to go. State may call their next witness.
The state would call Stephanie Jenkins.
Ma'am, will you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Ma'am, please have a seat. Ma'am, there is media in the courtroom here today. Do you object to your image being filmed or photographed during your testimony? Ms. Hutchinson, you may. You did say no for people in the back of the courtroom. You did say you had no objection for people in the back of the courtroom. Ms. Hutchinson, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, if you would please introduce yourself to our jury and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Stephanie Jenkins, Jenkins. I work for Scioto County Help Me Grow as the service coordinator.
Okay. If you would explain to the members of the jury what Scioto County Help Me Grow is.
Help Me Grow has two different programs. We have a home visiting program, and we also have an early intervention program. And I'm the service coordinator for the early intervention program. We receive referrals from different agencies. CPS will refer children under the age of 3 that come in contact with them to us. We get referrals from doctors. Anyone can make the referral to us. We're a program from birth to age 3. We work with children who have suspected disabilities or some kind of delays. We have a team that will come in and work with the families, work with the parents and the children to help them get caught up and developmentally where they should be.
Okay. Where is Help Me Grow located?
We are through the South Central Ohio Educational Service Center in New Boston. Our actual office is in the Carousel Center here in Portsmouth.
Okay, and you said you've been there how long?
5 years.
5 years, okay. And I think you kind of explained what you do as far as helping with other agencies and getting referrals. If you would explain to the jury how you became involved in the Dylan Groves referral.
We received a referral from Children's Services in Scioto County on January 25th. And that was just a typical referral that they refer when a child's involved with Children's Services.
Okay. And is participation in Help Me Grow, as far as on your end, as far as you're concerned, voluntary?
Yes.
Okay. Can it sometimes be required by Children's Services?
Yes.
Okay. And you said you received this referral from Children's Services?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you, as part of the normal course of business there at Help Me Grow, do you guys maintain records of referrals and notes that you keep in regards to each referral?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Let me hand you what's going to be marked as State's Exhibit 8. Record reflect that I'm showing this to the defense counsel. Ma'am, if you could take a look at State's Exhibit 8. Can you identify this for the record?
Yes, this is the record that we have for Dylan.
Okay. And you said that referral came to you on what date?
Let me get back to you. see, I received the referral on January 25th
Okay.
of 2019.
And did you bring a copy of those records with you also?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And are they the same records that we have here today?
Yes, they are.
Okay. So if you would explain to the members of the jury what efforts Help Me Grow made to make contact with this family.
First, when the referral came with Andrea Bowling listed as the foster parent. However, at that time, our rules and regulations says we have to try to contact the biological parent. So I attempted to call Jessica Groves at the number that was listed on the referral, and I got a voicemail saying she was not available. So then the next day, on the 31st, I attempted to call Children's Services to talk with a caseworker. I left a voicemail, and then Patricia got back with me.
Let me interrupt you just for a second. On the referral, you said you contacted a number that was listed for the mother, Jessica Groves.
Yes.
What address was listed for the parents of Dylan Groves?
2241 Mount Hope Road, Otway, Ohio.
Okay. And there are some reasons listed for the referral, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, if you would explain those to what Children's Services submitted to you as their reason for referral.
Their reason was child is a victim of substantiated abuse or neglect. And then it says that Dylan was in protective custody. It also, reason for referral was child was born affected by illegal substance abuse or has been diagnosed with drug withdrawal symptoms by a physician resulting from prenatal drug exposure.
Okay. So you said you made an attempt to contact mom at the number that you were provided.
Yes.
And that attempt was unsuccessful.
Correct.
Okay, and then thereafter you contacted a caseworker.
Yes.
Tell the members of the jury why you contacted that caseworker and what your plan was from there.
I contacted the caseworker. That's just our protocol to get some more information, to make sure that our contact information on the referral hadn't changed. Patricia did tell me that mom had the same, because on the address listed was Mount Hope Road, but she said that Daniel Groves had Dylan and his address was the same. And she had told me that mom wasn't staying there at the home with dad
And was she able to provide to you a phone number or phone contact information for Daniel Groves?
Yes, she did.
Okay. And did you attempt to contact Daniel Groves?
On that day, she had gave me a phone number and had also let me know when I asked when she was going out for a visit. She was going out the very next day for a visit for what she said was a 7-day checkup. And so I just asked her if I could meet out there at the same time, and that way I could explain the program and go over it at that time. She said that would be fine. So I attempted to call Daniel to try to let him know that and talk with him about the program. I left a voicemail on his phone that I would be out there at the same time as Patricia. And if that did not work, I gave a number to call me back.
Okay. And ultimately that did not work out, is that right?
That was correct.
Okay. But you also made further attempts to contact, before I get there, was your call ever returned by Daniel Groves?
No.
Okay. And then you made additional attempts to contact Daniel Groves, is that correct?
Yes, and by phone and by letter.
Okay, if you would, give the jury those dates that you attempted to make contact and what type of contact you attempted to make.
I tried to contact him on February 1st because that was the day I was supposed to go out and meet Patricia at the home. But the school district was closed because of severe weather, And our policy is if the school district is closed, that we don't go out, or we call and see how the roads are. So I did call Patricia at Children's Services and let her know that I would not be out there because of the weather, that I would reschedule that. And then I also called Daniel and left another voicemail saying that I would not be out that day because the day before I had called and had left a voicemail that I'd be
Okay,
out.
so that would be February 1st?
Yes.
Did you receive a call back from Daniel Groves?
No, I did not.
Okay, and then you called him again on February 4th and 5th?
And left voicemails both of those days.
Did you receive any call back from Daniel Groves?
No, I did not.
Okay. And it's my understanding that at some point you also mailed letters to the family.
Yes, I did. When I could not reach him by phone, I contacted the caseworker again to see if there was any changes in the phone number to make sure I was calling the right number. And then I mailed it was on the 8th that she let me know that she had been out there and had got her, it was on the 8th that I talked to her, and she had been out previously and got her vehicle stuck in the driveway. She did tell me at that time that, let's see, she wouldn't suggest trying to make it out there. And then I spoke to Patricia again on the 19th of February, and she said that to see what happened with court. She said that placement remained at that time with Dad.
And did you also mail a letter on February 19th?
Yes, I did. I mailed a letter. I let the caseworker know that I was unable to reach him and that I was mailing the letter, and I mailed a letter to Daniel.
Okay. And then you attempted to make phone contact with him again on February 28th, is that right?
Yes, and I got the voicemail again.
And then again, you mailed a letter on March 1st?
Yes.
Okay. What ultimately happened with the referral on baby Dylan Groves?
Ultimately, he was exited from our program on March 11th because there was no contact with the family. I was not able to reach them, and they never returned calls or attempted to contact us back from the letters or the voicemails.
Okay. And what other resources can you connect caretakers to if they are in fact cooperative?
Well, we have a home visiting program that we have someone that comes out to the home. They help work with the parents, work with the children doing activities, helping with the family to let them know developmentally what's expected. They do screenings and monitor the progress of the child. They can help refer to other programs.
What types of other programs?
If a child needs WIC, or if they need Head Start when they're close to the, we help transition the children from both programs at age 3 when they get older.
Medical card,
food stamps, anything,
access,
any therapies, or if they need transportation. Basically, anything that they would need help with, we could try to access. Or if we don't have a way to help them, then we can get them to the proper people that can help them.
But you never heard from anyone in this family regarding this baby?
No, I did not.
If I could have just 1 second. I have nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson. Mr. Stratton, you may cross-examine the witness.
I just have Mrs. Jenkins, good afternoon.
Yes.
I just have a couple questions, just to clarify things. That 7-day home visit that you had planned on going with Mrs. Kraft to, that was scheduled for the 4th of February, is that correct?
No, that was scheduled for February 1st.
February 1st?
Yes. And the 7-day, that's just what I was told by the caseworker, that they have to go out after they've been at the home for 7 days.
Okay. You contacted Mrs. Kraft and said you couldn't go because of?
Because of the weather.
The weather.
Yeah,
Okay.
because the school district was closed.
School district's closed. Okay. All right. Did you follow up with Mrs. Kraft about going to any of the other visits?
No, typically we don't go to the visits at the same time as they do. If we need to contact the family and haven't been able to reach them, then we usually try to reach out to.
Okay, but did you at any time attempt another visit at the residence or plan on attempting another visit at the residence?
No, we typically try to reach them through calling, through text, or whatever method we can as far as calling or mail.
So you never went out to the property?
No, I did not.
Okay. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stratton. Ms. Scott, you may cross-examine.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Good afternoon.
I believe that you stated in your early on in your direct testimony that this program is a voluntary program. Is that correct?
For us, Help Me Grow is a voluntary program.
Okay. And I know that you will also ask that sometimes it could be a requirement of Children's Services.
Correct.
Do you know if it was a requirement of Children's Services in this case?
In this particular case, I'm not sure.
Okay. So from your perspective and your agency's perspective, this was a completely voluntary thing if this family wanted to participate in it, correct? From what you know?
From what I know.
Not for question.
Right.
But from what you know. Okay, thank you.
Further questions, Ms. Scott?
No further questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hutchinson, any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Is this witness excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ma'am, you're free to go.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the state's next witness might take a considerable period of time, so it might be wise if we take our afternoon recess a little early. Remember my earlier admonition to you, as I indicated earlier, do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Do not permit anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. It is your duty not to form or express an opinion on this case until it's finally. Please be seated. Back on the record, State of Ohio versus Daniel Groves and State of Ohio versus Jessica Groves, NCR 586A and B. Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense ready to proceed?
We are, Your Honor. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Teaman, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, State of Ohio would call Patricia Kraft.
Ma'am, will you please raise your right hand for me, please? Ma'am, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Ma'am, please have a seat. Now, ma'am, we do have media in the courtroom today. Do you object to your image being filmed or photographed during your testimony?
Yes.
You do?
Your Honor, may we approach?
You may. Thank you, Mr. Teeman. The witness has objected to her image being filmed, would ask the camera to be lowered. Certainly, the testimony can be recorded as the audio and the portion of the image that would not show her face. Teeman, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, again, could you state your name for the record?
Patricia Kraft.
And could you spell your first and last name for the court reporter?
Patriciacraft.
Now, if you would, this is a courtroom that has a lot of echoing, a lot of squeaks and groans, being an old courtroom. If you could you speak up like you're hollering across the room to somebody, all right?
Yes.
You have any education?
I have a bachelor's degree with a minor in social work,
Where did you receive your bachelor's degree?
Morehead State University.
Have you had any other kind of training besides your degree training?
Excuse me?
Have you had any other training besides your degree?
I was a foster parent for 10 years.
Where are you currently employed?
Sauter County Children's Services.
If you could, where were you employed prior to Sauter County Children's Services?
Shawnee Family Health Center.
Anywhere else?
Not at that time.
How long have you been with Children's Services Board?
A year and a half.
So June or July of 2018?
Yes.
And what is your title at Sauter County Children's Services?
Ongoing caseworker.
Now, what does Sauter County Children's Services do?
We get referrals through our referring system, and an investigator or an intake worker will put the information in, and based on that information, it will be determined whether it's screened in or screened out. That means if it's screened in, an investigator will go and check the situation out. If it's screened out, then it just don't get nothing done with.
Is Sauter County Children's Services considered a government agency?
Yes.
Okay. Are they under the umbrella of Job and Family Services?
Yes.
All right. And what is their main goal at Sauter County Children's Services?
Reunification with the family.
All right. Is it also designated the Child Protective Services of Sauter County?
Yes, sir.
Now, you've indicated the process, so to speak, of getting referrals and investigating and going from there. Is that something that you also have to go to court for?
Yes.
And what court do you generally go to when there's a removal action?
Juvenile court.
Okay. Sauter County Juvenile Court specifically?
Yes.
So are you familiar with the juvenile court hearing process?
Yes, sir.
Could you explain that hearing process?
The first hearing is a probable cause. At that time, we show the evidence of why the child was removed. Then it will be set for adjudication and a disposition later on.
Okay. Now, sometimes things happen before you can get into court that are of an emergency situation. Is that correct?
Correct.
And sometimes there's an initial one-sided hearing at that point. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. And they call that an ex parte hearing?
Ex parte.
Okay. And then from there, they have the probable cause to confirm what happened in the ex parte hearing.
Yes.
After everybody's given notice.
Yes.
Okay. And adjudication is a fancy way of saying the hearing on whether or not there's an issue. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And then disposition's like, what do we ultimately want to do with the child?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to direct your attention to a child by the name of Dylan Groves, and to a certain extent, his brother Daniel Groves Jr. Are you familiar with these children?
Yes.
How are you familiar with the Groves children?
I was the ongoing caseworker.
And what does ongoing caseworker mean?
I do the monthly checks and make sure that they're following what the case plan states. Make sure they're going to the doctor's appointments, drug treatment, parenting class, whatever is put in the case plan.
All right, so prior to you getting involved, there's another personnel at Children's Services that investigates the initial referral?
Yes.
Okay. And who was the investigator in this case?
Lauren Johnson.
All right. What is your understanding of, let me back up. When, specifically with regard to Dylan Groves, how did your agency become aware that there might be an issue?
It was referral. We got a referral through the hospital when Dylan was born.
Okay. And what was the process from there with that regard?
The investigator went to the hospital to check on the child, and then it was then determined that there was no kinship available, and that's when Dylan was placed in foster care.
All right. The children, the parents of Dylan Groves, are they in the courtroom here today?
Yes,
Could you identify them by name for the record?
Daniel Groves and Jessica Groves.
Could you point them out for the court, please?
Daniel's in the sage shirt, and Jessica's in the cream-colored hair with the burgundy shirt, or purple. Yeah.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, now when Children's Services becomes involved in a case, do they maintain records of that case and any activities involved in that case?
Yes,
Are those records kept in the ordinary course of Children's Services business?
it's just SACWIS through the computer system.
Okay. And they're kept in any kind of abuse, neglect, dependency case that comes through the door?
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Let the record reflect, I'm handing the witness what has been marked as State's Exhibit 8. During the break, I already went to opposing counsel. I'm happy to review.
Counsel, I thought 8 was Hilton Grove documents and this should be 9.
Make this okay. We'll make this 16.
16.
All right, I'm handing you what's marked State's Exhibit 16. This is a microphone, so we don't want to slam anything on there, but could you take a look at those records? Ma'am, the records I've put in front of you, what do they appear to be?
They are documentation from each caseworker
Okay, with regard to whom?
to Dylan.
Right. Would you check the back? There might be some in there for Daniel as well.
They are.
All right. And it's going to get a little awkward because there was 2 sets of documentation provided. So I put some tabs there where there might be some overlap of some case plans. So don't remove those tabs yet. The defense counsel's okay with those being there, I assume. Those records appear to be accurate records of Children's Services records with regard to the Groves family.
Yes.
And are you familiar with these records?
Yes.
As we go through your testimony, it may be easier for you to be able to refer to those records as we go through somewhat chronologically. So feel free to utilize those records. I might ask you for some specific dates as well, okay? All right, you indicated that Children's Services had got involved in the case from a referral from the hospital, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what hospital was that?
SOMC.
All right. And then you indicated that Ms. Johnson, Lauren Johnson, was the investigator that went to the hospital?
Yes.
And you indicated ultimately that Children's Services removed the child from the parents and took emergency custody. I'd like to go back before that. to earlier on at the hospital. The records are there in front of you for reference. Initially, what was the Children's Services plan with regard to Dylan Groves?
There was an activity log on 111 where caseworker Johnson spoke with Mr. Groves and stated that he had not known that Jessica's drugs use until they were coming to SOMC for Dylan to be delivered. Mr. Groves stated that Daniel Jr. and Dylan are his top priority and that he would do what he needed to do in order to keep them safe. Caseworker Johnson did a safety plan with Daniel Groves until lab came back with the results of the drug scheme. Jessica is out of the home and there is no unsupervised contact.
Okay. And I know it's in there, but I'm going to, for the sake of ease of access, of marked States Exhibit 9, Your Honor. It's been showed to the President Counsel. Ma'am, I know this is part of this record, but could you identify this for the court?
That is a safety plan.
Is that the safety plan that you referenced in the Children's Services activity log that was initiated by Lauren Johnson?
Yes.
And if we could, see if you can read it from up here on the board. That's a horrible copy, and I apologize. See if we can make it read it. Okay, ma'am, I don't know if you can read that or not from there. Can you see the case name at the top?
No.
Okay. I'm going to hand it back to you. I'm just going to let you read it. This lighting is not great. All right. Ma'am, what's the safety plan you have there in front of you? What's the case name at the top?
Jessica Groves.
Okay. And as you have that there, I need you to really explain what's in that safety plan. So could you explain line by line what we're seeing, what you're going to be reading from?
Okay, it says identify the safety threats and serious harm from which the children needs protection. And it states that Jessica's substance abuse was reported.
Okay.
Then it goes to the action steps, and it says describe the activities necessary to protect the children. And it says Jessica must get a drug and alcohol assessment and sign a release form for us to get copies of everything that she went.
Okay. Let's see if we have it in here. In here.
The second action step would be Jessica is not to be left unsupervised with either child until further notice.
Okay, so the first step was that she wasn't going to live there.
Yes.
And then the second step was that she was going to not be left unsupervised with either child.
Yes. Then it says who will be responsible for the activities, and Daniel Groves would be the one responsible.
Okay. And on that, are there signatures at the bottom?
Yes.
Okay. So let me back up. So we've got who will be responsible for the activities. That's on there.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's explain how each activity will control the occurrence of serious harm.
The children will be protected.
Okay. And that, the person responsible for that was to be Daniel?
Yes.
Okay. And how will the activities be monitored?
Home visit, and it was to be done weekly, and it was to be done by her, Lauren Johnson.
Okay. And then at the bottom, what do we have here, the signatures was?
The first one is Daniel Groves, the second one is Jessica Groves, and the caseworker's signature.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. You can put that back in that folder. So at this point, initially there is not going to be a removal, but there is a safety plan for this child with his father.
Correct.
All right. And that involved weekly contact, drug treatment for mom, and supervised visits, but she had to remain outside the home unless supervised for visits.
Right.
Okay. What was the understanding of Children's Services with regard to Dad's employment at that time?
At that time, he informed that he had 6 months leave at Rural King.
Okay. And if you would, we're going to look at the activity log report starting, I believe, with January 11th. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay. And this activity log report, is this part of the Children's Services record you have in front of you?
Yes.
The business records, Children's Services. Who did this January 11th activity log report? Let me back up. What is an activity log report?
Activity log is what we do as a caseworker, like when we go out and meet the family, what we discuss, what they discuss, and if they need any assistance of everything. We also check for the safety and the basic needs of the children.
Okay. So at the very beginning of a case, whoever from Children's Services is there is going to start logging their activities on the case.
Yes.
Okay. So in this case, we have a log from January 11th of 2019, correct?
Yes.
What's it entitled?
It entitles Miss Johnson speaking to the nursing staff.
Okay. What is the subject of this? Well, why don't you go ahead and, if there are no objections, read that activity log report.
I'm going to leave that up there on that plastic and then lean forward. That might help the court reporter get a good recording. We're picking up your voice.
Caseworker Johnson met with SOMC nursing staff on 1/11/19 and asked for them to explain what unconfirmed meant. SOMC nursing staff explained that unconfirmed meant positive, but they are waiting for lab work to make sure that the test is conclusive. Caseworker Johnson met and spoke with Jessica Groves, and she stated that she realized she was pregnant in October when she felt the baby moving. Jessica stated that she has used heroin for about 6 months and continued to use until she found out she was pregnant because she did not want her nor the baby to withdraw. Jessica,
to use after she found out, she continued to use after she found out she was pregnant, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Jessica stated that she has not used in the home around her son or husband and stated that her husband, Daniel, did not know of her drug use until the evening she delivered Dylan.
Okay. And does it go on from there on the next page?
Yes. Caseworker Johnson spoke with Daniel Groves as he stated that he had not known of Jessica's drug use until they were coming to SOMC for Dylan to be delivered. Daniel stated that Daniel Jr. and Dylan are his top priority and that he would do what he needs to in order to keep them safe. Caseworker Johnson did a safety plan with Daniel Groves until the lab work came back with the results of the drug screen. Jessica is out of the house and there is no unsupervised contact.
Now, did Daniel, according to this note, was there any logging of information that the reason there was no prenatal care was because she was continually high?
There's no documentation to that.
All right. And then, so in this period of time, we're talking about January 11th. Dylan was born January 10th, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So this is still in the first few days at the hospital. There was indicia in the next note of a drug test or a drug screen for Daniel. Do you see that note? Kind of right in the middle of the page there, face to face.
1/13 of 2019.
Okay. And what's that say?
It says Caseworker Johnson received a call on this date and time. Caseworker Johnson spoke with social work Kristen Proctor, who stated that Scioto County Children's Service Board needed to take custody of Dylan due to unconfirmed on the drug screens, meaning a positive. Caseworker Johnson explained that unless there was paperwork stating that there were 2 positive screens, Children's Services had nothing to be able to remove Dylan. Caseworker explained that once lab work came back, a decision would be made.
Okay, so at that point, it's documenting there was some kind of misunderstanding between Children's Services and SOMC as to the drug testing. Is that a fair statement?
Correct.
Okay. Now, prior to that, on the page before, you referenced a drug screening for Daniel by the caseworker. You recall seeing that? That'd be on page 2 of 89. Well, those page numbers might be different, but that'd be after the January 11th note. There's another note face to face.
Yes, counsel, would you want me to send the jury out for a break? Will you figure that out, or? You may all be seated. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, during the recess, the attorneys had a lengthy meeting, and they came into my chambers and we had another lengthy meeting while you were in the jury room. It appears that the Children's Services records have come in multiple groups, has been provided through discovery in multiple groups. To ensure that all of the lawyers are looking at the same groups at the same time, we are going to recess this trial at this time, which is a little earlier than I wanted to. However, I think that would be to ensure that all sides have access to those records at the same time. I have reviewed the discovery from the state in this matter for the record. I do find that copies of those records have been provided to the defense. But since they're in multiple binders, I want to get those consolidated into one group so we're all talking about the same thing at the same time. So at this time, we are going to take the evening recess. Now, we had some discussion in chambers. Ms. Kraft is here. She has started her testimony. As I understand, the state's next witness has rearranged his medical schedule so he can be here at 9 o'clock in the morning. He may or may not be able to be here later tomorrow morning. What is the defense's position on allowing that witness to testify and then taking up Ms. Kraft's direct examination where we left off this afternoon. Mr. Stratton?
No objection, Your Honor.
Ms. Scott?
Your Honor, we would have no objection. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Kraft, what that means for you, unfortunately, is you're going to have to come back tomorrow. Do you want her here at 9 o'clock, Mr. Tiedemann?
I think that would be safe, Your Honor.
The doctor can be here later in the morning. We'll take back up at 9 o'clock with your testimony. If not, you will have to wait a little while, but we'll put you on. You intend to call her back immediately after his testimony?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ma'am, I talked to you a little bit earlier, but we took the recess a little harder because we're going to take an evening break. Since you've not yet concluded your testimony, you're not allowed to talk to anyone about the substance of your testimony until you've come back tomorrow and concluded what you have to say on this case. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
All right. I am going to excuse you. I'm going to direct you to be back here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, 5 till 9 if you would. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I am going to excuse you for the evening recess at this time. I am going to ask that you be back here at 5 till 9. The intention that we'll start promptly at 9 o'clock. Remember, you've heard me say this a dozen times now. Remember my earlier admonition to you. You're not